Welcome, family, to another wonderful, entertaining, edutaining edition of We All Be News Free Dixie for the 21st century. We got a special guest back on. I see I really enjoyed this brother and his commentary and his information. This is Nobody Dies, a Natural Death in Show Business Part 2. And today we'll be talking about Bobby Fuller and Tupac Shakur, among some other things. So I want to bring them on. Brother Albert, how you doing tonight or today, rather?
Hi, how are you?
Well, I'm
Hi,
good,
how are
man.
you
I'm
doing?
just trying to survive the time. I'm good.
Survive the time.
So,
interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to survive. I'm trying to thrive, but also survive so I can thrive.
Sounds
like they're playing like some.
Sounds like a business show on YouTube. Survive and thrive with Ron Hurd.
Going to stimulate that mind. You know what I'm saying?
Destroy those credit cards. Get rid of debt.
That's right. So what's going on, man? How you feeling? It's like you're in a good mood.
Am I in a good mood? I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess. Does it seem that way? I guess so.
That's cool. You know,
I'm a little. Huh? Go ahead.
No, I'm listening.
Oh, okay. Well, it's kind of an interesting world. The way things are going. It's funny. Yeah. I'm back on the show, but everybody's talking about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry and Piers Morgan, and I'm on this show talking about Tupac Shakur and Bobby Fuller. I'm like, I'm the opposite of the trends. I'm the opposite of what's hot right now on this show in terms of what my subject matter. So,
let me ask you about that. What is your take on the Meghan Markle and Prince Harry situation? What's your take on that?
Well, here's the thing. First and foremost, Meghan Markle managed to do in her own way what something I've been waiting for, to get Piers Morgan off of television. She succeeded, and I'm happy. When I found out he walked off of Good Morning Britain, I was overjoyed. In terms of the situation with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, the interview, here's the thing. The impression that I have of Meghan Markle is that she's someone in her life that's used to exerting control.
Yes.
So when you look at the situation with her family, even though I haven't followed this, I know there are people who ravenously mop this up and were into it. I'm not. But it is news and I can't escape it. It's like you turn on and everything's Meghan, Harry. Really? But it's like everywhere. It's not like the past where you could escape it. Now it's everywhere. But the thing is this. She's used to exerting control over her life. That's the impression that I get about her. And so when people look at her and her family life and the way things are, if she doesn't like something, she's used to going, that's it. See, she doesn't want to waste time. And I don't blame her in that respect. See, the reality when it comes, so she's used to exerting control. That's why they left England, meaning Prince Harry and Meghan. They left England because she didn't want to be there anymore. Because she didn't want to put up, not so much because she didn't want to put up with the tabloids. Keep in mind, she was an actress that was on a relative hit show called Suits, USA show, cable show. So she's used to dealing with press to a certain extent, perhaps not the extent that someone in the royal family would, but she's used to dealing with press. But the problem is that you're dealing with not only the British tabloids, but you're dealing with you're not in a fishbowl. You're in a aquarium. When you're in the British royal family, you're not in a fishbowl. You're in an aquarium.
Right.
You're in an enormous tank. And it's in this case, the sharks are are swimming in a separate tank and she's in a separate tank. This is an odd metaphor, but she's no longer in a fishbowl. She was in an aquarium, and she can't maintain the level of control, not so much over her life, but over anything else in her life because of what's going on, not only with the British press, but the British royal family. So it's a control issue. She's someone used to having not just her way, but having her and her say, but in having everything go according a certain method, a certain path. And when she can't get that, when she can't deal with it, she goes, I've got to get out of here. Because the control was taken away from her. The control not only over her own life, some of which she was probably willing to cede, but the control over other people that she could deal with, other elements. So once she lost that control, she needed to get it back. And the way she got it back was going, I think they initially went to Canada and then they went to the US.
Yeah.
So it's an issue of having control over your life and control over elements of your life and what's within. And that's what I think she has now. Again, this is really nothing new when you take a look at the history of the British royal monarchy. You have what happened in the early 20th century where you had the then King of England who decided to marry an American. It was Wallace Simpson, and give up the throne and live elsewhere. So there's precedent. That king, that member of the royal family understood that he can't do not so much control in his case, but it may have been he just got tight. He decided, look, I want to be with this person. And the monarchy for me and being on the throne is less interesting to me than being with this person. And so I will choose this and thus live the kind of life that I want. Right. And for him, it was partly, I think, lifestyle. Live the kind of life I want. With Meghan, it's not simply, in my view, in my analysis, life, it's control. Yeah. She wants a certain amount of control. She can't have it when she's in England, in any palace that they're in England, whether it's England, Wales, what have you, or any other part of the UK. So she decides to leave. And what bothers people about her is the fact that she is independent. It was the same thing that Diana had to be. She had to learn to be independent when she had her divorce and when she left. She had to learn to be independent and to value her independence. And Meghan's always been an independent woman. Now she wants to return to that, and she has, and she just has a husband, right? Who's just a high-profile person, and her husband's high profile. As for Piers Morgan, this is the point I want to make about Piers, who I've never liked, I'll just be blunt. I've never liked Piers Morgan. How he got the CNN job, I'll never know. Replacing Larry King for several years. He got fired from the Daily Mirror. The reality of Piers Morgan is that that's a guy who is another one of these sleazy, dirty Fleet Street or should I say British tabloid journalist. I'll use journalist with a quote. That's a guy who was in and of his neck in the hacking scandal several years ago. I don't know if people remember that. There was a phone hacking scandal where you had members of the British Constabulary, British police, that were involved with actually tapping into phone lines. And reporters were involved, and newspapers were involved too, because they were able to listen to celebrities and various other public figures and run wild with stories because they had all this recorded, if not recorded, then at least picked up surreptitiously in terms of phone surveillance. And Piers Morgan was involved with that. The extent of his role, I don't, and I don't think he's ever had to see the light of justice in that regards. And that's one of the reasons I don't like him, is the phone hacking scandal in the UK. I felt that guy is just gotten clean away. I mean, you could argue that Rupert Murdoch has too, but at least he had to go before a panel and talk about it, and close up his News of the World. So he actually had to close up a publication that was immensely successful. The News of the World was a very successful newspaper, very successful publication, and he ended up closing it. So he kind of paid a price for it. But I don't think Piers Morgan has. So I don't trust this man. I never have. And so the fact that he's walked off Good Morning Britain there in the UK, which is a morning show in the UK, is absolutely, utterly delightful to me. I'm very happy. He should just stay off TV because he's corrupt. He's someone you should not trust at all, and he's utterly corrupt. And one of these days, the truth about Piers Morgan will come out. The real truth about this guy will come out, and he'll basically have to face justice.
I mean, but who's going to dispense that justice? I think it's kind of like poetic justice right now for him, but who's going to dispense that justice? Who's qualified?
Well, that's the problem. That's why I say that I think he got away with a lot in the phone hacking scandal. I think he got away with a lot. And that's one of the reasons I don't trust this. Well, I don't trust a lot of people, frankly, but that's one of the reasons I don't trust him, is that whole phone hacking scandal. And Piers is corrupt. He's utterly useless and worthless. So.
Okay, yeah, I think most of those talking heads are useless and worthless to me. I mean, I think the whole CNN organization is really flawed right now. Yeah, I think they all. I mean, I just think that it's not news anymore when you telling me how to think or how I should view things. You should just be presenting information and let the public decide on how to define it and how to interpret it.
Well, that's not how it works.
No,
that's not how media works. It doesn't work that way. The idea that it's up to people to make choices and make decisions is BS. I mean, let's get real. I was in print media for over 20 years. There's no way in hell that print media is about simply giving you the facts. Any media, well, primarily television. Print has to give you a certain amount of facts. And my next appearance on the show will just be about media, where I'll talk about this. And my next appearance on the show will just be about dealing with media, because what you talk about is something that needs to be explored in depth, something that needs to be talked about in depth. So the next appearance, the next time, I'm just going to talk about media aspects of my career and my dealing with people that I've exposed for who they are, or exposed aspects of. So that will be the next one after this, because we've got, a couple other cases to discuss. But that's not how media works. That's not how television works. See, print media, newspapers, magazines, they have to give you a certain amount of information. And so that's why that's fundamentally, I'm just going to come out and say it. See, print journalism is real journalism. TV journalism and TV news is not real journalism. Let me repeat that. TV news is not real journalism. TV news is nothing more than entertainment with some facts. That's what it is. Now, am I biased in saying this? Absolutely. I worked in newspapers, I worked in magazines, I worked online for over 20 years. Am I biased? Absolutely biased. I confess it. I state that I'm biased. I state that I'm completely subjective in stating this, but I am stating an objective truth. But am I subjective about stating that objective truth? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the difference. You know, I'll come right out and say that I'm biased, and I'll come right out and say I'm subjective because I never worked in television before and I didn't want to. I never wanted to work in TV because I think that TV is nothing but televised lies. Not that everything is a lie, but it's the framing. It's how stories are framed. It's how stories are structured. It's how stories are set up on television and in broadcast. You can see this on certain outlets like OAN, or should I say OANN, however you want to look at it, Newsmax, Fox News, you know, even some of the other stations like CNN and MSNBC. It's how television works. In print, we can't do in print what TV does. We can't lie all the time, or most of the time, or half the time. You got to have some facts in there. You're a print reporter, you got to get some facts out there. You got to get some information. Somebody's got to have information, right? You read a story, you got to get something out of it. See, but I'm going to come right out and say it, you know. Again, I'm biased in saying this, but TV news is not real journalism. It's entertainment with some facts. After all, it's an advertising medium. Television is an advertising medium, right? The whole point of TV is commercial. They're putting on shows, sitcoms, drama shows, sports, all the kinds of programming to get you to watch commercials. They want you to watch the commercials. They don't want you to watch the shows. That's why you had developments like streaming. That's why you have DVDs. You can watch shows on DVDs now. No commercials there. But that's what television, commercial television, whether it's the networks or cables, exist. They exist for you to watch the commercials, not the programs. The programs get you to watch the commercials, and the commercials are made to sell the products of advertisers, which are corporations. That's how it works. But again, I have to say this again when I come back on the show. We're going to have a complete episode where we deal with media, because that's something that people don't understand, because people aren't taught anything about media unless you go to college and you take some course in media or something. They're not taught anything about media. The most that people are taught about media is if you go to film school. So you learn a medium, you learn production, you learn aspects of production, you learn lighting, and you learn editing, and you learn photography, and you learn, you know, how to direct people and how to write scripts and all this kind of stuff. So you learn some aspect of media, but you don't really learn. The average person doesn't know anything about media, which is why they can't understand it, which is why they're manipulated. And that's television is not there to inform. It's there to sell you. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you good. But I'm saying that's why it is like tell lies to your vision, right? It's about perceptions, about propaganda. People are programmed or dumbed down by design. It's easy to control people when you don't teach them critical thinking in so-called institutions of learning, which is like a lot of misinformation, a lot of misdirection. Because even before you had TV, you used to tell a lot of lies in print, like yellow journalism when William Randolph Hearst, where they fabricated that thing to start the Spanish-American War. There was no TV around back then. There were newspapers around then telling lies on things. And even if you look at, even if you go back to the Red Summer, to the Washington Race War back in 1919 of the Red Summer, they don't never talk about that because black folks fought back. You had the Washington Post instigating things, lying on black folks, saying they raping white women and doing all this, getting white people mad to take up arms against the black community in DC, lynching black people. So there was the Washington Post doing that. There was no Fox News Network back then, or no OANN. That was the Washington Post inciting race wars and riots and massacres. The newspapers.
Well, here's what you have to understand. You're dealing with sensationalism. Sensationalism is nothing new. What Hearst pioneered, along with someone like Joseph Pulitzer, was the use of sensational aspects, certain aspects such as crime, certain lurid aspects of everyday life, violence, sexual scandals, so forth, and they use this as a means to sell papers. And so a lot of some of the basic techniques that you see employed in television, were done to a certain extent in newspapers. But again, you have to understand that newspapers can't do what television does. They can influence people, but they can't really impact people the way TV can, because you're seeing someone talk about something, or you're seeing an image. And so it's the use of image married to the framing of issues that creates the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of TV news. Whereas with newspapers, it's very limited. Yeah, you can influence people. There's no doubt about that. You cited the Washington Post. Again, those are the basic issues about sensationalism, to some extent propaganda, though not entirely. But it's not that unusual. What I'm saying is that TV news is a whole different ballgame. Remember that newspapers are not entertainment. Television is an entertainment medium, or it's called that, but it's really an advertising medium. Whereas newspapers have advertising, but newspapers are not an advertising medium. Just like magazines have advertising, but they're not an advertising medium. They have ads in there to pay for the publications. So the ads pay, you have to fill up, as they call it, the hole in print publications with these ads, not just with the stories or the text of stories, obviously, but you have to fill it up with ads because they pay for the paper. That's what pays for everything. Whereas it's not that advertising doesn't pay for everything in TV news, but the focus is to deliver an audience to advertisers, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the newspapers, there's already an audience there. So what you want is to impact or reach out to that audience. There are people who read newspapers to get information, or read magazines to get whatever information or aspect that's there. Whereas in television, you are going to deliver, and you're trying to get an audience and deliver it to advertisers. And that's why you have shows. See, nobody looks at a newspaper to be entertained, but they watch TV to be entertained. And the reason why you have TV news is because of the FCC and the public service requirement. The FCC requires that stations provide you have to be in the public service. And that's part of why the news business emerged in TV. It was an easy way to fulfill that requirement. But again, we have to do an entire episode. So the next time I'm on here, I'll discuss media and all that aspect.
Well, I would say I don't agree with your assessment of newspapers not being entertainment, because you got comic strips in newspapers. Comic strips being there before.
Yeah, but a comic strip is a comic strip.
But sports,
you can have a comic strip.
What I'm saying is entertainment. Like the radio came before TV, right? People used to sit around the radio, listen to shows, people acting out stuff, playing music live.
Radio.
What I'm saying is
radio is a broadcast medium, like television. And they had news on the radio just like you do now.
What I'm saying with the newspapers, though, is a lot of lies printing. They print a lot of lies and make them fact over time.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So the newspaper's not above TV as far as promoting, peddling bullshit. None of it's above all this propaganda.
Well, here's the point from a journalistic standpoint.
All of it.
My point was that TV news is not real news. Print is real news. And again, I said I'm biased because I worked in the print business. Any medium can lie. Print, you can have lies in print medium and in print news, just like you have lies in TV. It's not a matter simply of lies. If it were simply a matter of lies, they both lie. They're both aspects. But the difference is that nobody reads a newspaper to be entertained. They read a newspaper to be informed. Whereas they watch television largely to be entertained.
People look at MSNBC. But I'm saying people look at MSNBC and CNN for what you just said about newspapers, and that's the problem. When you trust any source to be the only source, to be the oracle on the actual narrative, there's a problem. You know what I'm saying? Because people look at CNN like you talk about. People look at newspapers as a source of information, not as entertainment, not as propaganda, but as a source for the truth.
Well, that's because CNN is an all news network. See, they're not like the broadcast networks, but even TV news is entertainment because you have these shows. Fox News pioneered that in many respects. And that was actually being pioneered in terms of the panel shows that were on like PBS stations, the McLaughlin News, the McLaughlin Group, and these panel shows. That kind of paved the way for what you saw on Fox News, the O'Reilly Factor, yeah, what was Hannity and Combs, no, it's just Hannity now, Tucker Carlson, all of these things. Those aren't really news shows. There is what I call CNN and Fox News and MSNBC. I call them, you know, like the WWE calls itself sports entertainment. Right. I call them news entertainment.
Okay.
That's what they are. I call that news entertainment. So news has essentially become entertainment. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be part of an entertainment medium. Now with CNN, the rise of CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and these networks, they're news entertainment. They're all about entertainment. And so in terms of trust, the only thing I've said to people is trust the information. Don't trust the outlet. I've never understood why people trust outlets, but you know, I'm not in the advertising business. I'm not in the promotional business. I'm not trying to get people to watch CNN or MSNBC. So that's not my purview. I would always say to people, trust the information. If the information, if you don't like, you know, you can distrust the outlet all you want, but in the end, when it comes to news, it's a matter of trusting the information. That's what it comes down to. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
It's trusting information because in the end, that's what you're there for. The information. You're not there. I mean, okay, you may like the presenter, as they call it in the UK, or the host.
Yeah.
But again, it's the information. That's how I view it. But then again, I've been a journalist. That's how I view it because I'm dealing with sources directly. I'm dealing with materials. I'm dealing with documents. I'm looking at it, I'm going, can I trust the information? Not can I trust it or can I trust the source? But to me, it's all about trust the information. That's what it's about. That's the bottom line to me. And so that's what I tell people. Hey, if you want to distrust the outlets, be my guest. You got to get your news somewhere. But when you get your news, just focus on the news. Don't focus on the personalities. Don't focus on all the window dressing and all that. When you read a newspaper, what are you doing? You're reading a story. You're reading this article. You're getting whatever information out of it and whatever facts out of it. And so with TV, it becomes a little more, it's different in that you're getting it from someone. You're not reading it, absorbing it. And thus making judgments in your mind. You're watching it passively and going, you know, and you may have a judgment about it or you may not. That's the problem with TV news, is that it's passive. It's not active. When you're reading something, your mind is actively engaged. You're making value judgments or you're thinking about it. Whereas if you watch TV, yeah, you may think about it. You may agree or disagree. But in the end, it's passivity. It's docility. It's not activity. You know, that's, again, I think we need a whole episode to go into this because I'm not doing it justice in looking at media just in the minutes that we have here. I think we need an entire episode to do this. So, to be fair.
I mean, my thing is this: the media, you can't trust none of the information because the CIA controls the information. It's Operation Mockingbird. intelligence agencies, they control the information and they control the narrative. Even the Washington Post, it's been well known that there was a part of an intelligence operation with Catherine Graham, who was the owner of the Washington Post, and her editor, Naval Intelligence. I think his name Ben Bradley, who was over the guys who did the Watergate thing. All this stuff is controlled by the institutions, man. They decide what stuff get out there and what's get.
Well, that's news in general. Again, you're looking at the news process. News is as I've said before, not here because I've only been on here once, but what I've said before is that news is a process. And in my analysis of the news business, what you have is three factors that I've broken down to three factors. Mm-hmm. There's collation, there's interpretation, and there's dissemination. Collation is going out there, getting the facts, getting the story, getting the information. Interpretation is, if you're on TV, putting the segment together, editing it, sweetening it, doing whatever. And when you're for a newspaper or whatever, you write it, put it together. And then dissemination, of course, is sending it out there. It's printed in a newspaper, it's printed in a magazine, it's on TV, it's broadcast on TV or on the internet. That's what I call the news process in the years that I've been a journalist, or I was a journalist. I call it that. I didn't learn that from going to journalism school because I just went to college. I didn't major in journalism. I was somebody who came to the news business without, some may argue, the indoctrination of journalism school, but I don't say that. But I came to it from a different perspective. I studied literature. I studied English in college. So I had worked on like a school newspaper in high school, but.
Okay, we lost Brother Albert. Hope you come back in. But it's very interesting. Talk about the media process. We do got to have a show about that. Hopefully he'll be coming back in soon. Lost his connection. He's calling from Hawaii. And let me see. I think he's back in here. Hey, Brother Albert, everything good?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
The CIA.
Maybe
happened,
I was talking too much about the media.
Yeah, know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
they
I was talking. As soon as I said something, it was like, as soon as I said, should I mention this? I don't know if I should mention this, but
go ahead. Do what you gotta
do. That's never happened to me in a live stream before, but whatever. I guess the wrong button was pushed. I don't know what happened. I was on a show years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was discussing, I don't know if I should bring this subject up. People can read about it in my blog, but mm-hmm. I was discussing, have you ever heard of a guy called Danny Casolaro?
I know of him. Yeah, that octopus stuff, whatever.
Right. That's right. Inslaw. Right. One of the few things I was known about years ago was I was interviewed about that. Mm-hmm. I've been interviewed twice about it. I've written a blog piece called
hey Brad, tell us a little bit about who this guy was, whatever. Like, can you give us a little back story about that and then get into what you're gonna say?
I'll try
if possible.
I have to give the briefest because I've been interviewed about this and it's been like 2.5
I know. It's crazy.
It's a hard. I'm telling you, the whole Inslaw octopus affair. It's very difficult to discuss. You can't discuss it in 1 minute or 2 minutes. But what I will say is Casolaro was a freelance writer. He was a guy who was investigating something called the Inslaw affair, which was a computer, a firm that had created software primarily for prosecutors' offices, federal prosecutor, U.S. attorneys' offices, called PROMIS. I think it was called Prosecutors Management Information System. And what happened was they had a contract with the federal government. And this contract was supposed to be for, let me see, 3 years. I think it was like $10 million, like $3 million per year that they were supposed to get. They got paid to the first year. At the second year, they didn't. What happened was the federal government had basically pirated the software. Justice Department had pirated the software. So, and what they were doing was what it wound up was they were selling the software to other nations, the intelligence agencies, because this software this was the early 80s, you got to understand at the time. And what they would do is they would be able to collate files because, prosecutors' offices had a lot of files, right? And they would collate files. The software could collate files electronically, organize them, line them up. And what happened was, again, this is getting complicated. The software supposedly had been re-engineered on a reservation in Indio, I think California, on a Cabazon Indian reservation by a guy known as Michael Riconosciuto, who was kind of a prodigy when he was a kid, technical prodigy. And he had stated to this couple that had created the Promise software, the name was William Hamilton. I think his wife was Nancy, but William Hamilton. He came forward and said, yeah, I reconfigured the software and did it and introduced a backdoor to the software that required a password. So it's password protected. And all you needed to do, if you had the password, you could tap into the software and you could read all the files. So since this was being sold to other nations and other intelligence agencies, if you had the password, you could tap into these files and you could read all the collected data and information. And there were other elements that were involved in this too. So the Hamiltons ended up, so what's his name? Casellero was investigating this. And Casellero then kind of wandered on to another subject. From that point on, he got into what was known as the Octopus, which was this sort of shadowy organization of former intelligence operatives. Yeah, that's the book of the Octopus that was written by, I think, Ken Thomas and another author. One of the authors of that book ended up dead, I believe.
Okay.
It was kind of odd circumstances. But in any event, Riconosciuto, that's him there in the picture. Riconosciuto was a guy who used to have like a computer magazine. And he sold at one point and got into freelancing. I think he had got into he was a writer, and then he got into this computer magazine, and then he sold it and he got back into it. And so he was, what he got involved with, it was sort of like the Inslaw, looking into the Inslaw affair, had allowed him or moved him into looking into the Octopus, which was this sort of clandestine organization of former intelligence operatives that were supposedly involved in, quote, regime change efforts, as we would call it, in various nations and various other operations. So you have affairs or aspects such as BCCI, Bank of Credit and Commerce International. You have Iran-Contra. You have what is known as the October Surprise, which is not considered an official conspiracy. I could go into October Surprise, but I don't have the time. And so what happened was that Danny was getting into this Octopus. I think he had pitched a book to a publisher, Little Brown. And at some point, he was meeting with, he went to Huntington, West Virginia. And Huntington, West Virginia, to meet with, I think his name was William Turner, and get documents. I think he also was meeting with someone else. Now, I think some individuals or witnesses or something along that line had mentioned that he had met with I think it was an Arab person at the Sheraton that he was staying at there in Huntington, West Virginia. And he was found dead in his hotel room. He was in a tub of bloody water, and he had razor cuts on both arms. I think it was close to half a dozen on each arm, or close to it, but it was like a dozen in general. And there was a supposed suicide. But the odd thing was that Casolaro himself was squeamish. He was very squeamish when it came to water.
Mm-hmm.
So he was squeamish when it came to water. Not water, it was squeamish when it came to blood. Sorry. He didn't even like to take blood tests. Nothing like that. So the fact that he was found in a pool of bloody water and that he had supposedly slit his arms or slit his wrist was odd. Another odd aspect was that his body was taken to a funeral home and immediately, let me see. I think it was immediately, I don't know, what's the term?
Embalmed.
Embalmed, that's it. It was immediately embalmed. And that was supposedly against the law in West Virginia. You couldn't just rush a body to a funeral home or anywhere else and embalm it. But they'd have been taken there and embalmed. And his family wasn't notified that he was dead until about what? It was, I think, over the weekend. I mean, after the weekend. I think it was a Monday. They were told. His brother was called, or his family was notified. So it's. I mean, again, I can't believe that I managed to get that in 10 minutes or whatever the amount of time is. But that's a whole other. That's another episode. I can't go into detail about that.
Well,
I was interviewed years ago for 2.5 hours about this.
Yeah, it's very complex.
It's very complicated. It's very complex, as it would say on yearbook. I'm sorry, in Facebook. It's complicated. It really is. And so I can't believe I did just the basics there in that amount of time. And that's about all I can say about it. That's about all. I'd have to come back to on another show and discuss this by itself. Because it's oh my goodness.
Yeah, I would tell people that
it's so many rabbit holes. And so I've written about it in a blog piece. You can find it on my blog. And my blog is medium.com/@thedoctor50. That's medium.com/@thedoctor50. And the name of that blog piece is called Labyrinth. But that deals primarily with the inslaw and the octopus, not as much about Danny Casolaro. So, but that's the only thing I've written about it. And I was interviewed about 8 years ago. And that was basically what I was known for. If I was known in terms of interviews on shows, was, the octopus and the inslaw affair. So that is a whole, it's not a rabbit hole, it's several rabbit holes. Trust me on this one, folks. It's several rabbit holes.
And what y'all can do, y'all can Google up his name, Danny Casolaro, and the octopus thing, and all the insular. There's a lot of information, documentaries on there. I remember Unsolved Mysteries did a show about that years ago.
Yep.
And a couple other things that people have done that can really break it down, the complexities of it all. But there's a lot of paper trail, a lot of blood. It's not just him getting killed. It's a lot of people that, I mean, it's like, Hollywood can't write a better script than what went on with that situation.
Oh, this will never be on a Hollywood. In my view, because I've been interviewed about this years ago, and I've written about this. I don't believe this will ever be a Hollywood movie. I don't think this will ever be a major motion picture. It's far too complicated, and it's so many implications to it. I would be surprised. I was surprised that Gary Webb, who I've also written about in my blog, a blog piece called Terminated with Extreme Prejudice. I was surprised there was a movie about Gary Webb, but I could understand that. That's a lot more feasible to deal with. People are aware of Gary Webb. He did a piece for the San Jose Mercury News about the crack epidemic in Los Angeles and CIA.
Yeah, Iran Contra. Dark Alliance.
Right. Dark Alliance was the name of the series.
Yeah, you can still read it online.
Right. So that has been made into a movie. I would be surprised if this got made into a movie. I just don't see it happening.
I think it don't need to be a movie. It need to be like a limited series, like on Hulu or Netflix or something like that. It needs to be like they did for Frank Wilson, Frank Olsen.
Yeah, maybe.
No, they can do it. I'm gonna tell you why. They did a
It's
thing
too
called
complicated.
Worm. It's not too complicated. You just gotta.
Yes, it is.
2 hours. No, not really, because you just gotta break it down and make it plain and make it simple for people. Dumb it down a little bit. Make it plain. Because look, they did a show.
It's very hard to dumb this down. It's very difficult. There's so many.
Not really. It's not really. You've been prepared for it.
It is. I mean, like I said, I've written about it, and I've looked into this, and it's something that to explain it, you've got to take the time to explain it.
Yeah, but it can't be.
Could this be done as a movie? No. Could it be done as a limited series? Only in a only in a dumbed down way, and I don't think it would work. I don't think it would work.
I'm gonna tell you why it would work. Let me just finish my thoughts on this, because it's not that hard to understand, because you got the internet right now. People need to look up this stuff. There's a lot of information out there, documentaries. You got stuff on this, but it was a thing called Wormwood that came out on Netflix several years ago. It was a limited docudrama series about Frank Olsen, who was a CIA scientist from the 1950s who worked at Fort Detrick, Maryland, who actually helped develop LSD. So if you don't understand, LSD was a drug developed by the government. And they was afraid he was going to be a whistleblower. So what they did, they took him to a hotel in New York and threw him out the damn window.
And he fell out of the window.
Yeah, but let me finish. They said it was a suicide, right? But his family did not believe that. So his family ended up meeting with Gerald Ford, who was the president at the time. His family, including his oldest son, who's basically dedicated his whole life to find out what happened to his father. And the mom met with the president. And he said, look, we are bad. He basically said, we killed your husband. We killed your father. Here's some money and shut up about it. So they actually exhumed his body. His son exhumed his body and found out that he was indeed murdered. It was not a suicide. And they made a series about it. I mean, you got information. Look up Frank Olsen. This information is out there, and this can be done. It can be done. People can learn these. Like we come out Gary Webb. They did the movie.
Could it be done? Yes.
It has
Could it be done? Yes. I don't think it's going to hit the light of day. That's just my view after having looked into this. I think there's a lot of there's just a lot. There are a lot of unknown factors here, and there's a lot of things I think that even to this day that certain parties don't want people to know, and certain elements do not want them to know, and it's possible that it could be done as a limited series, but I just don't see it happening. I would be surprised. I would be surprised.
I mean, look. This month marked this year will mark the 20th anniversary of 9/11, right? But this month, 20 years ago, you ever heard this show called The Lone Gunman? That was a spinoff to the X-Files.
Yes,
you know about
I'm familiar with it. I was going to write I was supposed to write a book about conspiracies in film and TV. And part of my research was the pilot episode of The Lone Gunman.
So let me make it simple for the people, because I want to move on some other. Y'all can look up Lone Gunman. The pilot episode is on YouTube, is online. Look this up. It's a video, and basically it was a spinoff of the X-Files, right? And the first show, it talks about commercial airliners being hijacked by a rogue government element. They hijacked the computers of the commercial airliner to try to fly into the World Trade Center. This is March of 2001. This is the first episode of The Lone Gunman. And what happened later that year? September 11 happened. So it's a thing called predictive programming that these folks do, like the Simpsons. People say, how do Simpsons predict the future? Because they in bed with Operation Mockingbird. They get their money from the Defense Intelligence Agency, from the CIA. It's like you look at 60 Minutes, their top consultants are CIA affiliated. So I mean, the games, but this stuff is not that hard to understand.
There's an affiliation. This is kind of old hat to me, but I guess for other people it's new. There's always been a relationship between intelligence agencies and media outlets. John Stockwell, who I believe was a former intelligence agency agent, revealed this in I think it was the 70s and 80s. He was talking about the relationships between news outlets, reporters, and the CIA and intelligence agencies.
Yeah.
And so it's old news, but one of the things I know on another show is that, unfortunately, when you had the church committee hearings in the late 70s, that exposed a lot of what happened in regard to intelligence agencies and what they were up to. They exposed a good deal, right? Supposedly the family jewels of the CIA have been revealed by the New York Times in the 70s, jewels being some secrets, some aspects. A lot of their activities, a lot of what they were doing were revealed. But these were just some activities. And so in the end, a lot's been forgotten about. Not a lot, but, you know, what's his name? Frank Church ended up not getting reelected.
And he died of some cancer.
Right.
That's the senator from Idaho.
I think in 1980 to Senate.
Yeah.
And so when you look at the exposure, some of this, you know, the intelligence agencies and their operations and their methods, some of them have been exposed. But you can't expose everything. They don't want people to know really what's going on or entirely what's going on. So some of it has, but again, in regards to the media, you had John Stockwell. He revealed a certain amount. I think Walter Pincus was another one who mentioned it, or mentioned aspects that sort of union between, or the working relationship between intelligence agencies and major media in this country.
Well, I'm gonna tell people, look, I'm gonna make it plain for the people.
That's especially the case. That's especially the case in regards to Gary Webb. See, Gary Webb was destroyed, and I noted this in my article. Gary Webb was destroyed when major media outlets went after him. L.A. Times, New York Times,
right,
Washington Post, and some of those outlets had relationships with intelligence agencies.
They did.
Or
all of them
probably were doing it at the behest of intelligence agencies.
Yeah, all of them.
And so you have to look at it. So that especially comes into play when you're dealing with Gary Webb and you're dealing with him. But wow, we've really got.
Look,
we've really got.
Yeah, but
I never thought I would be talking about these things today. I'm like, whoa.
But here's the thing, though. All people got to do, you got you a computer, internet, Wi-Fi, look up the term Operation Mockingbird. All that stuff you said flies on the term Operation Mockingbird because the media is controlled by U.S. intelligence. Katharine Graham's husband was a friend of JFK. They claim he committed suicide. Y'all can look that up. But Katharine Graham, folks, all U.S. intelligence, man. So this is nothing new. They control the narrative. That's why Gary Webb, the
relationships between the media and intelligence agencies are nothing new. Yeah, they're nothing new.
People got to understand. It's not just a coincidence. This is like an actual operation. Like you talking about Frank Church, the senator from Idaho, with the church committee hearings of the 70s. It exposed counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO. You had the FBI sending coloring books about Black Panthers to white families across the country, trying to scare white folks and not supporting or understanding the Black Panther Party. This is the federal government doing it. It's a branch of the federal government or agency within the federal government using our taxpayer dollars to undermine and destroy the civil liberties of our fellow Americans. This has been documented. This is not no fairy tale. This is not no suggestion. This is reality. So y'all look up Operation Mockingbird. Y'all check out the church hearings from the 70s. And Frank Church was really a profile in courage. Because like you said, it cost him his career and probably cost him his life for exposing.
He didn't get reelected. I know that. Again, those hearings, so there's been a certain amount revealed. It's always that way. It's always a certain amount revealed. But it's kind of interesting where this conversation's gone because I'm like, I guess I assumed I was going to talk about true crime, and we're now getting
this is
into
true crime. Well, this
other
is
kinds
true
of
crime.
crimes.
Well, okay.
We're getting into major crime, the kind of crime they dare not talk about, crime they
Well,
dare
okay.
not discuss.
Let me put this.
That's what these elements are about.
Yeah, but
So
let me put this out
that's
here
why I
again.
say. That's why I say I need to come on in terms of media. I got to come on and just talk about media. Just talk.
We talk about media every day. This is what this is right there. We
But I
talk
mean,
about media every day.
I mean, in terms
Or
of the
when I'm
stuff
doing
that
the show.
in terms of the stuff that we were talking about, it's only fair that I like do entire show on it
I want to
because
see what.
there you can go into detail. Yeah,
Look,
it's fair.
my people, I feed them like this all the time. This is nothing new. This part of the talk, man. I don't, I'm a jazz guy. I improvise, but what I'm going to say, bring it back to what we need to discuss. The headliners of Bobby Fuller and Tupac. You ever heard of the Tavistock Institute? You ever heard of Tavistock Institute?
Yes, I've heard.
Okay,
yes, I've heard
you
of it.
realize, okay, people forget, Kennedy, FK was assassinated in November of 63. What happened the next year? You got the Warren Commission, and then you got the Beatles coming from England, the British invasion. Now, Dick Gregory, who was a friend of mine, he was the guru for John Lennon and Yoko Ono. He helped them to detox from drugs for good. He helped John Lennon and Yoko Ono kick their drug habit for good. They brought him over to England or to Europe in a cave. He had a cave mansion. He actually had a mansion that was in a cave. And Dick Gregory detoxed John Lennon and Yoko Ono. And he gave him a prayer book that led to the song. That song John Lennon did, Imagination or something like that. Imagination. You know that song I'm talking about? They did towards the end. Yeah, he was inspired by Dick Gregory because Dick Gregory gave him a prayer book and it inspired him. He talked about that in a couple of interviews. But what John Lennon told Dick Gregory was that the Beatles was brought over to America to get young people hooked on drugs. There was a product of the Tavistock Institute, was MK Ultra Mind Control Manchurian Candidate stuff, Tavistock Institute. So there was a product of that. They were brought here to hook the American youth on drugs and to stop people from questioning the official narrative of the so-called Warren Commission report. If you look at their songs, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, right? That's LSD. Hey Jude is talking about heroin. So when John Lennon was trying to change his ways after he got detoxed, they assassinated him at the Dakota up in New York. Now they said it was Mark David Chapman that did that. That's his name. But the doorman at the Dakota was a Cuban national who was an assassin for the CIA. And the lead detective said he don't understand why the guy was waiting for them, Mark David Chapman. He committed the perfect crime. He could have got away with it, but he was just sitting for the police to come to arrest him. That's what the lead detective said. It's like he was just waiting for us to come and arrest him, even though he could have got away with it easily. So what I'm saying is they did all that to get John Lennon out the way, but John Lennon admitted that the Beatles were used to get young people hooked on drugs. It's like with Jimi Hendrix. His manager, Mike Jeffrey, was British intelligence. He was MI6. This is the guy that controlled Jimi Hendrix's career. MI6 British intelligence controlled Jimi Hendrix's estate, and then he died in a plane crash, but his body was never recovered. See, I know cats that hanged out with Jimi Hendrix. I talked to this lady who was a widow of Larry Lee, one of Jimi Hendrix's best friends from Memphis. He was there days before Jimmy died, but he was talking about how he had all these weird people around him, like these white women posing as gypsies. But he thought there was something fishy about them. But they murdered Jimi Hendrix, man, because one thing, he gave a lot of money to the Black Panther Party. He was a big supporter of the Black Panther Party. Just like when John Lennon got into the peace movement or anti-war movement, they got rid of him. And like he said, he was brought over here to get young people hooked on drugs.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, all you can find is just research, but let's talk about.
I'm sure this is something that you tell your viewers all the time. As you were saying that you're used to normally this, I guess you talk about a variety of things on the shows. I guess it varies depending on the interviews that you do. But like I said, I didn't expect to go into media and then Danny Casolaro and the octopus and all that. So I have gotten way off. We've gotten way off the subject, and I feel like ugh, you got to give the people what they want. Apparently,
No,
so.
actually, I am giving the people what they want. It's not way off. You just like, this is the way my show roll, man. Because like it's too much to cover.
Okay.
But I got it back to the musicians, right? So let's talk about Bobby Fuller now.
That's right. Yeah, I see how what you're doing. Yeah, you're trying to bring it back. That's why I didn't say anything. I'm waiting to come in for the link. And since we're talking about musicians, let me just briefly talk about Tupac Shakur, because that's a case that has a lot of heat on it.
Okay.
There's A&E series and all of this. There's a lot that's out there. You talk about, you tell people, of course, you're telling people, go out and Google and research. There's plenty on YouTube you can go to look up if you're interested in the subject of Tupac Shakur. For me, I'm less interested. Let me just make this brief, because I want to really go into Bobby Fuller, because I've never talked about Bobby Fuller. I was supposed to say I recorded an episode on another podcast, but I was told they didn't record it or something didn't go right. And I was like, okay. So it was weird.
Come on, Bobby Fuller. Come on. We did Bobby Fuller episode, didn't get recorded. What are you talking about?
That's why I did an episode on another podcast. I recorded that in another episode. And I was told, oh, the software didn't pick it up. It was kind of odd. It was unusual.
Man. How long you was on the podcast?
Yeah, this was some time ago. I think it was like a couple of years ago or so. And I was like, really? Well,
that's not cool.
Like I said, I've had a couple weird things happen to me. I'll just briefly say this. I was on a show talking about the the Inslaw and octopus.
Yeah.
And I got knocked off the air.
Okay. Well, it happened today too, right? Did it happen I mean, you are. But
it was weird because it never happened to me before. It was some kind of like high pitched. Actually, it's out there. It's people can look it up themselves, and I would invite them to. Let's get back the Ocelli effect.
Okay, I like that show.
And I don't know what it is. To this day, I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is. I don't know what happened.
Well, welcome to my world, man. Welcome to my world. That's all. That what happened. But let's talk about
what happened to you. Okay.
A lot of stuff happened to me, man. My background is interesting. I'm just I come from interesting people, man. That's another show. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Talk about
Tupac. All right. So a lot of people know. I'm sure your audience knows a lot about Tupac, and I'm sure you do. In terms of the case,
he's my favorite rapper. But go ahead.
Right. Okay. So, Tupac, of course. I'm just going to say from the outset. I'll just say this because I don't want to talk too much about the case because a lot of people know about it. What I'll say about Tupac is this, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of people who disagree with me. I don't believe that Tupac was the subject, was the target. I believe Suge Knight, who was in the car with Tupac, was the target. So I believe Tupac Shakur was killed as collateral damage.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't really believe he was the real target. I think he was convenient. I think that he was there, and it made sense because of Tupac Shakur's problem. He had been shot before at Quad Studios in 1994. He had been and he had gone to, he had shot at two cops. He had gone to Dannemora up in New York, and done a little time. So he had a background where his death could be written off. Oh, it's a East Coast, West Coast thing. But I don't believe that Tupac Shakur was the real target.
Okay.
I believe the target was Suge Knight. Now, Shakur was killed on not killed, but he was shot at, I should say, in September 7th of 1996. He was in Las Vegas attending the Mike Tyson Bruce Sullivan fight, I believe it was. But it was attending the Mike Tyson fight at the MGM Grand. And what happened was that he and Suge got into a vehicle along with other vehicles that were following them. And when they reached the intersection of Flamingo and Koval in Las Vegas, a white Cadillac, I believe it was a white Cadillac, pulled up and started shooting at both men, primarily Tupac. Tupac was shot about 4 times, and I believe, supposedly Suge Knight was grazed in the head once. And he was taken to hospital in Las Vegas, where he was on, I think he was in a coma. And he died, meaning Shakur, September 13th, 1996. So he died a few days later. He was 25 years old when he died. And so the basic outline of the shooting is they're in a car, they're coming from the MGM Grand, they're in a car, they're heading down Flamingo and Koval, Koval, that intersection. This car pulls up and starts shooting. And he's, meaning Tupac, was shot about 4 times. And Suge Knight was supposedly hit once, grazed in the head, supposedly. Now, those are the bare details. There was a drive-by shooting. So those are the bare details. Now, the belief when it comes to this case is that this was a gang aspect. Crips, Bloods, and that it was a gang rivalry. There was a guy called Orlando Anderson who was at the MGM Grand who got into an altercation with Shakur. And before they left the hotel. And supposedly Suge Knight, a bunch of others were kicking at this guy. Once, supposedly Frank Alexander, I believe, who was a bodyguard for Tupac, sort of grabbed him, according to what he stated, grabbed him and took him out of the MGM Grand, or on his way out. Supposedly Suge Knight and others were kicking at Orlando Anderson. Now, since this occurred in 1996, I believe there have been no arrests. There certainly hasn't been a trial. Don't know. So there has been no formal justice in regards to the shooting of Tupac Shakur. It's still considered an unsolved case. And those are the bare outlines.
Okay. So you feel like that Tupac was not the target of this?
No.
What happened to him?
No.
But how do you explain? But how do you explain the Quad Studio situation, or even the situation where he got into with 2 Alpha Duty Atlanta cops down in Atlanta and shot at them and got off for it? So you don't think he was a targeted individual at all? He was never targeted, or even the situation with the sexual misconduct where he did not go to prison for rape, if for like improper touching of the buttocks or something like that. That he did not rape the young lady, Miss Ayanna Jackson, and he still went to prison anyway.
Well, that's getting into his life. I'm just dealing with the elements of the shooting and what happened. My suspicion since it happened has been that Tupac wasn't the target. I believe they wanted Suge Knight out. Meaning Suge Knight, of course, was the head of Death Row Records. And the only thing that interests me is not the shooting itself. I don't really have an interest in the case per se in regards to the shooting because it's pretty standard. There isn't anything unusual about it. It's risky because it's what I've seen in videos of the area where they were shot. It's a very busy intersection.
Yeah, and after a Tyson fight,
it's risky to come up, drive up, and shoot. Yeah, and it must have been very busy that night. It had to have been pretty busy. So my point is this. I like I said, I believe it was Suge Knight because Suge Knight was the head of Death Row Records. And I think this was a move to get him out either kill him, or eventually he ended up going to prison. I think because he supposedly had kicked and tried to stomp on Orlando Anderson at the MGM, and that violated his parole. And so he ended up doing 9 years, or he had a 9-year sentence. So I think the point was to get at Suge Knight. And because Death Row Records, I think, was under Interscope, the other corporate entity, Interscope Records, was according to what I've read and what I've seen, was like a $500 million company, $500 million worth of that amount. And I think the element was to get at this guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have what also gets into this element is, or gets into this case, is the police element, right? Because you had police officers who were working security for Death Row Records. You had a relationship that had been ongoing. LAPD officers.
Have you ever heard of this, that Tupac was never officially signed to Death Row? I heard about this on this channel called The Art of the Dialogue. It's the best Tupac channel out there on YouTube, The Art of the Dialogue. This brother I don't think he was even born when they killed Tupac, but he got some of the best interviews on Tupac friends and insiders. And one of his friends and a collaborator said that Pac was never officially signed to Death Row for a 3-album deal. And matter of fact, it wasn't Suge that put up the money for Tupac. But like you said, the parent company, Interscope, actually put the money for Tupac, but they needed Suge as the face of them putting up that money, because they was in a situation with C. Dolores Tucker and their company, Time Warner, whatever. It's some crazy stuff. But Pac never was signed to Death Row. That's what they saying now.
That's interesting.
Have you heard of that?
That's interesting, because Tupac went to Death Row to, I think, from what I've heard and from what I've read, he wanted to record with Dr. Dre and with Snoop Dogg.
Right.
And because he was already a star before he went to Death Row. Death Row did not make Tupac Shakur a star. He was
already. To rewrite the history
on
that, though. They're trying to rewrite the history on that right now.
Oh, really?
Which is crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they rewrite the history.
That's why it's funny. That's why I mentioned this. This is why I mentioned this. Death Row did not make Tupac. He was already a star. He was already selling thousands of albums, 1,000 CDs before he went to Death Row. He went to Death Row specifically to record with Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre. So from what I understand, it was supposed to be a move to make that move and to be there. I don't know if he wanted to stay there permanently. Now, if he didn't have a deal, if he didn't have a deal, then what kind of arrangement would Death Row have with Tupac?
I mean
it's kind of.
Cause here's the thing, like with Tupac, he's the first music artist in history to have a #1 album while in prison. So Me Against the World, one of my favorite, albums of all time of any genre. He was the first person in history, in Billboard history, whatever, to have a #1 album while in prison. And Tupac was so prolific, he basically did a whole bunch of material to get out that as soon as possible. I do not believe he was going to stay on jail. Yeah, he just wanted to get out of jail. Yeah.
When he left jail, he recorded like 200 songs or something like that. He didn't want
to stay
over, I don't know how many days.
Yeah. He didn't want to be
at least half a year. He was recording a lot of material. Because the scuttlebutt was that he might go back to jail, might go back to prison, which he didn't want. So he wanted to have as much material in the can. He wanted to have as much material in the can. And now, I'm not aware that I don't know that he didn't have a deal with Death Row. I haven't heard that.
I will say this. Now, this came out recently, but it makes sense.
Go ahead.
Because Interscope, Tupac was an Interscope artist. Like Me Against the World, it was Interscope. But they used Suge as the cover for them to put the bail money to get Tupac out of prison. And I would say this, Tupac was married at the time. His wife and Suge came up with the idea of doing that way, to bail them out, getting Interscope, whatever, to give them the money to bail out Tupac. So it originated with Tupac's wife, this idea, I guess, of getting her man out of prison. So people don't know about that Tupac was married. But my thing is this, I gotta ask you, so who benefited from the removal?
Surprise me.
Who ordered
it? Surprise me.
Okay.
On Suge Knight?
Who ordered it? Yeah, who benefits from that?
That's a good question. Who benefits? I think, first of all, I think you have to look at his wife, Sharitha Knight.
Okay.
I think you have to look at that. She would have to at least have some knowledge of it, or I don't know about involvement, but so in terms of who ordered it, that's going to be a lot harder to determine. That's going to be a lot harder to determine.
So you never heard of this situation with Reggie Wright Jr., a Compton police officer who was running down. You don't think he was? I mean, I heard allegedly that elements of LAPD was involved in not only they hit on Suge and Tupac, but also Biggie. That's been coming out. You know, you got a movie called Labyrinth with Johnny Depp and Forrest Whitaker that talks about the big
Labyrinth was written, I believe, by Randall Sullivan. He has a book out.
He wrote the book.
Based on the book, it should be that's the one.
Yeah,
that's the aspect of this which interests me. I'm not interested. The actual shooting itself, again, was pretty not unusual. It was risky, but it was not unusual. All the other stuff surrounding it and around it is interesting because you had police involved as working for Death Row Records as security at events. There's like off-duty officers. And of course, then you have the Rampart scandal in LA, right? And then you have officers like Rafael Perez, what's his name?
David Mack.
David Mack reportedly was a former, was it Mob Piru? I don't know if former is the word, but it was a former Mob Piru. So you have Rafael Perez. He ends up going to jail on drug charges, among other things. You also had David Mack, who robbed a bank.
I thought, wait a minute, was it that? Now, David Mack didn't rob the bank. David Mack was a guy who said he was working with the FBI too. He was law enforcement and he was moonlighting as
you mean Kevin Hankey. That's Kevin Hankey.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Hackey.
Kevin Hackey.
Yeah.
David Mack.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Hold on. Here's the thing. You got to get the corrupt elements right. What's his name? Kevin Hankey, said he was undercover FBI. If you look at the documentary Biggie and Tupac by Nick Broomfield.
That's a great documentary.
He claimed he was undercover FBI and that he got screwed over. Yeah. He ended up going to prison, I think, related to gun charges or something like that. And he was at the time he was interviewed for that documentary, he was what? He was I think he was like a bounty hunter or something.
He was doing like a private investigation.
He's
doing private investigation or something like that. Investigator.
Something like that. It was like a bounty hunter or something. Then you have like David Mack. Mack had robbed a Bank of America. So you had Rafael Perez, David Mack. Both broke the law. And then you had, what's his name? Kevin Gaines. I think his name was that. Was it Kevin Haynes or Kevin Gaines?
It was Kevin Gaines.
He was the one that was in a relationship with Sharitha Knight.
Yeah, he got killed this couple days after Biggie got killed. He got killed.
He was shot by another officer.
Yeah, undercover.
Shot by another officer.
Yeah, white officer.
Right.
Undercover plainclothes.
Which I don't believe. I don't think that was an accident at all. I think that was just an outright execution.
It was. Because then when the Rampart stuff started coming out, as soon as they killed Kevin Gaines, that's when all that Rampart stuff started coming out.
Right. That's another element is the Rampart scandal in LA with LAPD and all the corruption that came out there. Like I said, you had Rafael Perez. He's dealing in drugs. He's dealing and he's breaking I don't know how many laws. You had David Mack, I think he admitted to other people. He had been a gang member.
Yeah.
and robbed a bank, of America. And then you had, what's his name, Kevin Gates, who was shot, killed by another officer. And
Right.
he supposedly was in Las Vegas at about the time that Tupac Shakur was there for the fight.
You talking about Kevin Gaines?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was there. He was there in Las Vegas, right? Like Kevin Hackey, I think his name is Kevin Hackey.
Yeah, it's Hackey. Kevin Hackey.
Yeah, Kevin Hackey. He was a former Compton police officer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Reggie Wright Jr.
Right.
was another Compton police officer, but he ended up working at Death Row Records.
And his father was over the Compton Police, Reggie Wright Sr.
Right. His father was at the last I heard, I don't know if he's retired or what happened to him.
I'm sure he retired by now.
He was a gang officer with
Yeah.
Compton PD, which was a notoriously corrupt police department. Notoriously corrupt police department. Just the amount of corruption, quite staggering. But so what I found interesting about the whole aspect was the confluence between the police element, and I'd call the corrupt law enforcement element, and the recording artist element, meaning the music industry element. It's that combination. And that's what's interesting about the case for me, that aspect. To me, like I said, my belief is, quite frankly, that they were after Suge Knight and that Tupac Shakur was collateral damage. Now, there are people who will disagree and say, well, he was the target. And I'm going, it's plausible. But I think they wanted Tupac to look like, and his death to look like, a gang issue. East Coast, West Coast, rivalry. And it was easy to write off Tupac Shakur because he had been shot at Quad Studios. He had been in prison. He had been in jail. He had been part of, to a certain extent, a certain rivalry in the rap music industry or the rap business. It was easy to write that off. So Tupac was a convenient collateral damage. He was convenient collateral damage in my view. But I think they really wanted Suge Knight. They really wanted him. They wanted him out of the way.
Two birds with one stone. I think it's two birds with one stone mentality, because Pac didn't want to be in Vegas, according to a lot of people that been interviewed since that time. He did not really want to be there. So they say, "Oh, come on, Pac." And then Kevin Hackey said he was trying to stop the hit from going down, because people said that FBI was on the scene when they got hit in Vegas. Just like people said that FBI was on the scene when Biggie got shot at Wilshire.
Right, at the Peterson Auto Museum. Supposedly you had FBI there taking photos.
Just like the FBI was involved in the killing of Malcolm X, Dr. King, and Fred Hampton Sr. You just had a person make a deathbed confession saying that the NYPD and the FBI was complicit in the assassination of Malcolm X. Not only that, you can't say Tupac wasn't the target. Let me finish. Let me finish this point right quick. Because you said Tupac was not just collateral damage. They were getting two birds with one stone, because Malcolm X's chief bodyguard, the day he got hit, was Gene Roberts, who was New York undercover bossy counterintelligence operative. The same dude that set up Tupac's mom, Afeni, in the Panther 21 was the same guy on the scene when Malcolm got hit. And you got to look at Tupac's godfather, Geronimo Pratt, a Panther that was framed and spent almost 30 years in prison. Then his aunt is Ashada Shakur, who's an exile in Cuba. So Tupac was a desired target too.
No, his mother was a Black Panther as well. Do I think?
Let me put it
this way. That Tupac Shakur got killed, I think, worked to a certain extent for those. I don't believe that they wanted to go after him specifically. I don't think he was the prize for them. I think the prize was Suge Knight. I think they wanted Suge Knight out of the way. And I think what happened was, if they were able to kill both of them that day, it would have been more effective for the parties behind this, because they would have said, "Oh, you had both men would be dead. They'd get what they want, and he would just be part of the unfortunate spillover from the targeting."
Okay, that could be that.
Go ahead, sorry.
Now, what I'm saying with Suge was interesting, right? You know that Hasbro, they own the rights to Death Row music, right? Catalog.
Yeah, they got the rights. Yeah,
but they stole it. It was on Expo. How they did it was legal theft, because Suge should still be in possession of those masters. They stole it from Suge through the courts. It's articles that came out.
They wanted him out of the way.
They stole. I mean, they stole it.
They wanted Suge Knight out of the way. They wanted Suge Knight. If they couldn't kill him,
prison now. He's in prison.
Put him in prison.
Yeah, he's in prison now.
And you notice that Death Row Records, you mentioned Hasbro. Yeah, they have the rights. They have ownership of Death Row Records.
That's crazy.
A game company known for putting out Scrabble, for owning Scrabble. They own Death Row Records.
But also
that is bizarre. I don't know what it is.
They do Transformers and G.I. Joe too, so that's a hell of a soundtrack for a movie. For a new Transformers or G.I. Joe movie, they have that Death Row soundtrack.
That would be odd, but
they stole it from Suge. I'm just saying, you can go look at articles that talked about, and then you talking about your media.
Well,
what about Chuck Phillips from the disgraced Chuck Phillips, the former award?
Well, I figured this was going to come up. I was going to bring him up.
Okay,
that's one of the reasons I don't believe that what's his name, Tupac was the target.
Okay,
because you see the structural setup. Chuck Phillips was fired from the LA Times, I think, for basically writing stories that were BS, from what I understand. And he was the guy who wrote the stories about what would I say, they did an investigation of, I think it was the Biggie Smalls? I don't know, it was Tupac Shakur or
he said that Puffy put the hit out on Tupac through the Crip.
Oh yeah, Tupac, right?
And then the Crip killed Biggie because Puffy didn't pay him.
One of the things that they said was, one of the aspects was, there were, I think, one of the aspects that Phillips advanced was that Biggie Smalls could have paid $1 million to someone to have Tupac.
It wasn't Biggie, it was Puff Daddy. P. Diddy, allegedly. Not Biggie, but P. Diddy. Puffy, he had that. He put the $1 million hit, allegedly.
Well, that's another one. But that's another. There is a theory that it was Biggie tying Christopher Wallace, Biggie Smalls to it. That he supposedly not only had he paid money, but also given his gun to shoot Tupac. And so Chuck Phillips was part of in the LA Times, was advancing the theories that it was a gang-oriented affair, that Christopher Wallace, aka Biggie Smalls, may have had something to do with it, and that Orlando Anderson, who was in the MGM, might have been the shooter. And so what you're seeing is a narrative that's advanced, which is it's all gang related, or it's all faction related. If it's not East Coast, West Coast rap, then it's Crips Bloods. It's gang related. This was the narrative that was advanced in order to explain the death of Tupac Shakur. And again, I don't believe that was the case. I don't believe that it was a gang issue. I don't believe that it was a matter of Crips and Bloods or what have you. I believe that it was aimed solely at Suge Knight. It was a matter of getting him out, getting Death Row Records, number one, either getting control or getting influence over Death Row Records, and number two, it's hard with these cameras. Number two, it was a matter of getting him out of the way. So you want to get him out of the way, and you want to gain influence or control over Death Row Records. And as you know, Hasbro, a game company, owns Death Row Records. That's as bizarre as it gets. But I don't believe that Tupac was the target. I think he was collateral damage, and he was an inviting target. Inviting, because if he got shot, it could easily be explained. Oh, well, this guy has had issues in New York. He's had issues with East Coast, West Coast rap rivalry. He's been shot already. Even what's his name? Christopher Wallace had stated, he's interviewed. He said, when he heard that Tupac had been shot, he said, again? And he thought he would pull through it, but he didn't. So you see, there's an easy narrative that's at stake. That's why the Tupac Shakur case has been easy to kind of dismiss for a number of people. It's like, well, the guy was involved with gangs. He was involved in this East Coast, West Coast rap rivalry. Somebody on an opposite faction or opposite gang shot at him. That's the way it goes. But of course, there's been no suspect that I'm aware of, and no arrest, and we don't know who killed Tupac. But I think whoever shot Tupac really wanted to shoot Suge Knight, and it was to get Suge Knight out of the way, and to get him away from Death Row Records, and get him possibly out of the business. That's what I think.
Game mission accomplished. Then he's out, and he might spend his last days.
It didn't quite happen the way they wanted, but they got him out.
But I still think that Tupac was a target, man, because like that COINTELPRO piece, you got to think about the United States versus Billie Holiday, or Billie Holiday versus the United States. You think, oh, she's just a jazz singer with a drug problem, but the government spent a lot of resources trying to get Billie Holiday. She even got into a shootout in Philadelphia. That movie didn't talk about the shootout that the feds had. The cops got in the shootout with Billie Holiday in Philadelphia. They were not only trying to put.
You're gonna have to take that out with the filmmakers of the movie.
I don't get my history less from Hollywood. That's why I'm trying to tell people. Just do your own research. But this cat right here on the screen is Michael Harris. They say he was the actual man behind Death Row. And
the thing about Harris is this: Michael Harris was one of the things he was trying to do was get his wife. He was a major drug dealer, so he's kind of the silent partner, behind Death Row Records. From what I understand, he was the guy that kind of helped put, I think, the financing. If not the financing, he helped put together the enough of the material aspects to get Death Row Records up and running. And he was edged out, so to speak.
And they put him in prison for almost 30-some years.
Right.
And that
again, look at the pattern. Look at the pattern here. This is why I'm telling you this and telling others this. Look at the pattern. You look at Harris there. What happens to him? He's one of the major forces. He's one of the early forces behind Death Row Records. What happens to him? He gets put in prison.
Yeah.
Then you have Suge Knight. He's another one. What happens to him? He's in the car with Tupac Shakur. He gets grazed, according to what happens. And then he's with Denzel Washington. He helped produce a play that Denzel Washington was in.
Not only did he help, I'm gonna give him his credit. I'm gonna read this for people so they know he not only produced a play, he helped birth his career. He gave light to Denzel. Denzel break came with him. See, I'm saying we gotta, he got released. I think Trump got out of prison, right? So let me read this thing. Former cocaine kingpin Michael Harris, who helped found Death Row Records, the label behind music legends Dr. Dre, Tupac Shakur, and Snoop Dogg, is set to be released from prison after 31 years behind bars. The former drug kingpin helped run a multi-million-dollar rap music empire from his cell after founding the parent company for Death Row Records with $1.5 million investment. Alongside his dealings with the cartels, Harris ran a string of successful legitimate businesses, including a theater company that gave actor Denzel Washington his first break. So Harris was convicted of attempted murder and kidnapping in 1988, but has since reinvented himself as an activist while inside campaigning for prison reform. So he should be out. I think he's out now. But
right. Is that's the guy who got pardoned by Trump, right?
Right. Trump, yeah. I'm saying this is crazy. Trump pardoned the drug kingpins and queenpins, but a lot of our revolutionaries are rotting away in prison. So that's not a reflection on the president. To me, that's a reflection on us as Black people for not having an agenda to help our people out, especially those who helped us, who made some big sacrifices. So, I mean, it is interesting, man, when you peel back this onion, but who benefits from the removal of the king? My thing is this: who was really behind all this? Because you don't think there's no street level gangs that pull all this stuff out,
no,
right?
I don't. Again, you have to look at you have to look at the fact that you have this collision between law enforcement and the music industry. You had undercover, you had LAPD cops that were working with Death Row Records, and as security and working off duty. And you have the officers that I mentioned before: Rafael Perez, David Mack, Evan Gaines. And what's also interesting is you also have the fact that the bodyguards like Kevin, I think it was his name, Frank Alexander, Michael Moore, had stated that they were told not to bring their weapons, and they didn't have radios with them. That's now, another element.
Who told them not to bring their weapons?
No, I believe it may have been, I'm trying to remember. It may have been Reggie.
Reggie Wright Jr.?
It may have been Reggie Wright Jr.
Compton
but
police?
They were told not to. They've said in interviews and documentaries that they were told not to bring their weapons and not to bring their radio with them.
That sounds like some November 22nd, 1963 stuff.
Right. And of course, Suge was in the car with Tupac. So my point would be this: there are people who think that Suge was behind this, and I reject that right off the bat.
No, I don't think Suge. Why we would, as big as he is, why we gonna be sitting next to Tupac in that little tiny BMW with no bulletproof? I agree with you on that. I never thought Suge.
So this guy is gonna go and set up a killing of Tupac, and then go in the same car as Tupac. I don't care how tough you think you are or how risky you are. No one with any common sense would do that. And I don't believe somebody like Suge Knight would do that. It just doesn't make any rational sense. He's going to go, because anything could go wrong. Anything could go wrong. If you have a drive-by shooting in a major intersection or in an intersection in downtown Las Vegas, or in Las Vegas, I was downtown, but in Las Vegas, anything could go wrong. So it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make logical sense. It's not believable. And people, again, it's another element of, oh, well, it had to be someone. It had to be Suge. It had to be East Coast, West Coast. It had to be gang related. These are narratives that are put forth to get away from what I think is the real factor here, and that is that Suge was the real target. I think he was a real target.
What was interesting about the whole thing, we were talking about media earlier in this show, is the fact that the media instigated an East Coast, West Coast war. It really wasn't that. It was a beef between two organizations, two entities, two men, and it grew out of hand because the media fed those flames. Because Tupac was doing collaboration with East Coast rappers. Tupac is from New York, grew up in Baltimore, and to Oakland. So Tupac is a little bit from everywhere, but he was working with rappers like, Method Man and Redman from the East Coast. They're trying to do One Nation album with the Boot Camp clique. Tupac, I mean, like the media helped instigate this thing and then want to walk away from it and have those people that were the victims of this thing. They the ones pointing fingers at each other. But what I'm saying is, this is interesting. Like 20 something years later, removed from Biggie being popped. That was 24 years ago on March the 9th. We still dealing with the same old stuff. We didn't have social media back then like we do now.
No.
So
No, you
one
didn't.
thing about social media, for all its faults, it's good because you could create another narrative. You could counter the narrative of the so-called official story. You could create a counter narrative, or you kind of can create a narrative because you got this social media apparatus. You know, we're doing this cancel culture bull crap. You know, so I mean, I think it's interesting right now. We still don't really have an understanding of some of the things or entities and people behind these type of things.
No, and you're not meant to. That's why you have East Coast, West Coast, why you have gang, why you have Suge Knight as the possible progenitor of this killing of the source. What you have are quote unquote suspects that are put up in various shows, in various segments, and various stories. You have to create a narrative, and then you put the narrative out there so that people won't look at the potential reality behind what went on with this shooting or other shootings or other killings.
Yeah, Tupac, Marin City. Oh, I mean, Tupac had love from everywhere, man. Tupac was an interesting character, man. That's why he's my favorite rapper, because he had love for a lot of people. And I think he gets shortchanged a lot of things because people don't understand. You got to look at his background. Like I said, I believe he was targeted by the government, man. I ain't gonna, because the stuff that it happened to him. And also you look at his family background, his family tree, his roots, man. He come from freedom fighter.
That's a separate factor. Yeah, it's possible that he could have been targeted by the government. But in the case of his death, I don't believe he was the true target. I think the true target was Suge Knight.
I think Suge was a major. Yeah, I think Suge, because
I think it was the target.
And Sarita, I heard things about Sarita Knight and Kevin Gaines and Reggie Wright Jr. make you say, allegedly. I don't know what the truth is, but you know, it's not no regular. Like you think about, okay, people talk about Bloods and Crips. The first time I heard about Bloods and Crips was a movie that Hollywood produced called Colors. Ice-T did the soundtrack. I didn't learn about no Blood or Crips from no Stanley Tookie Williams. He was in prison. Raymond Washington was dead. The only way I know about Bloods and Crips is through the media, through Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
They proliferate this death culture across the country. And then you go Michael Harry O, right? He was a cocaine cowboy, whatever. He was peers with Ricky Ross. Freeway Ricky Ross was a functional illiterate.
Yeah, Ross knew him.
Yeah, but I'm saying you trying like.
Well, at one point he was. Yeah, I think he learned to read in prison.
Yeah, he learned. But
and that's that gets into the whole Gary Webb thing.
Yeah, but
what
I'm saying this, like, you want to make America always, they've used black people as the boogeyman for America ills. The CIA are the biggest drug traffickers on the planet. They did the Iran Contra stuff. They did the Dark Alliance. That's the CIA. It's not no dude out of South LA that did all that. And they used him and put him in prison for a while. But like Michael Harry O, like, look, what Michael Harry O was doing as far as setting on legitimate businesses, all these white elite families did the same thing. I don't care if they're the Vanderbilts. I don't care if they're the Kennedys, the Bushes. They all got into illegitimate enterprises and made their money clean and legitimate over a couple generations. Like Lucky Luciano used to say, behind every great wealth, there's the great crime. When black folks try to do what white folks been doing for generations to become legitimate and enterprising and all that elite, they throw our ass in prison. The same thing.
Well, I guess if I were talking about simply about Ario and Freeway Ricky Ross, that of course would be germane. Getting back to the matter at hand, yeah, I really do think that that Suge Knight was really about Suge Knight, and they really wanted to get him out. And I just don't see Tupac Shakur as the target. And again, I know that people will disagree with that, but that's just how I see it from what I've seen of it. Again, what interested me, I'm not terribly interested in this case per se, but what interested me was surrounding it. You had the law enforcement element and the music industry. That's interesting. That's very intriguing to me. And what was going on, the other elements behind it. Very interesting.
Okay, well, speaking of that, like we're going on track. Let's get to Bobby Fuller because a lot of that plays out in Bobby Fuller's case. That happened,
Oh,
yeah. Talk about Bobby Fuller and
well,
also the.
see, that's an odd. The case of Bobby Fuller. See, the difference is with Tupac Shakur. That's a standard. The death itself was not unusual. It was it was risky. It was very public. Drive by in Las Vegas.
Mhm.
But in the case of Bobby Fuller, what you have is a very, very, very odd death.
Mm.
Very odd death.
Okay.
People who don't know who Bobby Fuller was a musician. He's originally from El Paso, Texas.
Mhm.
Actually, he was born in Baytown, Texas, and he had spent a sliver of his childhood or part of his childhood in Utah. I think in Salt Lake City, and then they came back to um, El Paso, and Fuller himself was, I think, basically kind of a, I don't want to say he was a born musician, but he's pretty much that. He was into music from a very early age.
Mm.
They get taken piano and he learned other instruments. He was, I think, when he was a teenager, he had built a studio and is in his parents' house. I don't know if it was their den or garage, but he had built a studio, his own studio. He got some reel-to-reel tapes and tape recorders, and he had basically kind of built kind of a makeshift studio or his own studio, and he would record there. I think he may have. I'm trying to remember whether he recorded albums or not albums, but records there. But I think he may have recorded a couple of songs there, or early songs or early pieces of music. So he was a guy. He was a musician, very focused on music from the time he was very young, and he didn't really have much interests but music. He liked the ladies, I think, and I think he liked automobiles. But beyond that, he was into music. That was it. He was just music was his sole focus, and he was a huge Buddy Holly fan. So Buddy Holly was like his idol.
Yes.
And so what happened was he was an interesting guy again because we talked about Sam Cooke last week, and Sam Cooke was interested in the business side of the music business, publishing and management and owning the masters and so forth. Bobby Fuller was also interested in the business, but it was all more the technical side for him because he would go to the library when he was a kid. He would read about like sound engineering and I guess trying to make a studio or whatever, and he built his own studio. And what he did when he was in El Paso was he founded a club, for teenagers. Because when he was a teenager, he would sneak into clubs to watch live music. And I think sometimes he would play these clubs. But he founded a club for teenagers so they could go and listen to live music. And there was no alcohol. But so he had this club. The club was doing well, was financially successful, or very successful for him. And of course, he was, playing music. He had a band. The eventual band that he had was called the Bobby Fuller Four.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was, I think, recording on like independent labels. So he was playing in various venues and recording on independent labels. So he had this club who was doing well for him financially. And he was playing music. And he had recorded what became his signature hit, I Fought the Law and the Law Won. He had originally recorded that as a local, it became a local hit. So it wasn't a national hit at the time. What happened is he eventually went out to California, I think about 64 or so. And he signed up with a guy called Bob Keane, who was an owner of a label called Delphi Records. And he actually got signed, I think, to another label, maybe in the imprint. It was Mustang Records. And they got, so they started doing what bands of the era did and they do now. They got, they were recording. And so what happened was the I Fought the Law and the Law Won, or I Fought the Law, which was a local hit. He ended up recording that, I believe, for Mustang Records. And that became a national hit. I think it went as far as number 9 on the charts, on Billboard charts. So that became a big hit. And he also had, he did, I think, a cover. And I Fought the Law was a cover. It was written by Sonny Curtis. Sonny Curtis, I think, had replaced Buddy Holly with the Crickets.
Right.
Because the Crickets were the band. And Sonny Curtis went on, I believe, to write the theme song for the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Mm.
So that was a cover. I think he also did a cover of Bobby Fuller with the Bobby Fuller Four, as they were known. Did a cover of Loves Me to Fool of You, which I think was a Buddy Holly tune, or something, a tune that Buddy Holly had done. Mm-hmm. So he was a guy that was on the cusp of, he was on the verge of becoming a major star. And he had this sort of he was kind of a rock and roller kind of, Southwest kind of, because he was the king, rock and roll king of the Southwest. I think that was the title given to him. But he had that kind of southwestern flair in terms of the music. And this was at the time that the Beatles were becoming enormous. They were, the so-called British invasion. And so his music, and it was nothing like the kind of Beatles pop music. It was fundamentally kind of guitar-driven rock and roll. And I think influenced somewhat by like surf music. That was, from what I've read, that was an influence and an aspect. But I would call it heavy guitar-driven rock music. And on July 18th, 1966, Bobby Fuller was found dead. He was found dead in a blue Oldsmobile that was owned by his mother. His mother had come out to L.A. to visit him. And so he was in his mother's blue Oldsmobile. I was lying on there. Now, reportedly, let me read. I believe this was on the. I believe this was on the coroner's report. Quote:
okay.
Deceased was found lying face down in front seat of car, a gas can, 1/3 full, cover open, windows were all rolled up and doors shut, not locked, keys not in ignition. And so we start getting into the odd nature of Bobby Fuller's death. Now, let me just set that up. That's where he was found.
Mm-hmm.
The night before, Bobby got a call about 2 in the morning or 2:30 in the morning or something like that. It was in the morning. And he went out. He took his mom's car because the Oldsmobile belonged to his mom.
Right.
And so he took that car out to meet someone. Now, the problem is we don't know who he met. His mom didn't know who it was that had called. There was someone else staying there or was there in the apartment. They didn't know who had called. But he had gotten a call late, and he was a bit of he was a guy who liked to burn the midnight oil, right? He was somebody who was up late. So it's not like he was an early sleeper. He was somebody who was up late. So that was not unusual. We'd go out to eat, something like that. So the Oldsmobile, like I said, was owned by his mother, and he went and took it out to meet this person. Now, the strange part was when morning came, car wasn't out in the parking lot of the apartment they was living in. And so I guess his mother had noticed the car wasn't in the parking lot. I mean, wasn't in the spot in the parking lot. And it really wasn't until, I guess, about 5 p.m. that she noticed that the car was there. So it was later afternoon. She goes, reportedly, she went to the car and went over to the car. And, you know, my understanding was she opened the door of the car and she found Bobby there on the front seat. Like I said, he was lying on the front seat of the Oldsmobile. Now, there was supposedly a puddle of blood, according to those who saw him. I think his brother also saw him in the car. His brother Randy saw him in the car. The odd thing, there are a lot of odd things about this case. A lot of odd things. Right off the bat, what was odd about this case was that he was in the front seat of the car, lying on the front seat, supposedly blood underneath his head. There was a gas can with a nozzle attached to it that was on the floor near the front seat. So it was on the floorboard of the car. Now, when the police came, I don't know whether it was a plainclothes detective or whether it was a uniform, but a police officer, when LAPD came, an officer took that can and threw it away.
Right.
Bob Keene, who had by this time had come to the scene, had supposedly watched the cop do this, and he said, "Well, why are you doing that? Isn't that evidence?" The guy said, "No, it's not. It's a suicide." So it seems like the prevailing idea of the police at the time was suicide in regards to Bobby Fuller. And I'll get a little into that. But like I said, when we look at what happened with Bobby in the car, he was found lying on the front seat of the car. Supposedly, his body was in a state of rigor, meaning rigor mortis. So people who saw his body in the car said that he had bruises on his body. Now, in the coroner's report, supposedly this is written off, I believe, as petechial hemorrhage. Because of another odd thing. Here's another odd thing. He's found in this car. Bobby was found, and he had gasoline doused all over it. In fact, when his mother found him in the car, the smell of gasoline was overpowering. So he's found lying on the front seat of this Oldsmobile, doused in gasoline. There's a gas can lying on the floor of the vehicle next to him. So that was how he was found. Now, I've seen a number of cases and I've seen a number of deaths, including celebrity deaths, that I've read about or familiar with. But this is one of the strangest I've ever seen. I don't think I've ever heard of a case where somebody was found doused with gasoline in a car with a gas can right next to it. It's something that is completely unusual to me. And so not only was Bobby found in this manner, so let's look at this. Let's go back and look at this. Bobby leaves the apartment at 2 a.m. or somewhere around that, sometime in the morning. He leaves, gets into his mom's Oldsmobile, drives it off. He was supposed to have a meeting with, I believe it was Bob Keane, Delphi Records. Now, and of course, never made the meeting. I think he was also supposed to meet with the bandmates. And of course, he was a very disciplined and focused guy, especially with his career. So he gets this call at 2 something in the morning, goes off to meet whomever he was that he met or saw. The car isn't there in the morning. He doesn't show up for the meeting. And the car reportedly is not there in the parking lot of his apartment building there. It's not until the afternoon, my understanding is about 5 p.m., that the car was there. Now, another thing is that, I don't know if they were members of his band, but a couple of individuals were there at the apartment before his mother discovered it. And they said they didn't find or didn't see the car in the parking lot. But when the mother came out to check the mail, she saw that the car was parked in the parking spot, in the parking lot of the apartment. So there are these odd aspects in this case, very odd aspects. Then you have Bobby himself. He's found in the front seat. He's found doused in gasoline with a gas can right next to him in the car. And it appears to be in a state of rigor mortis. Now, people had said that his hands, he had fingers that looked broken. They said that he had bruising on his body. My understanding is that, again, that the coroner's report had kind of written off some of this as petechial hemorrhaging, dealing with the gasoline and, impact of sunlight or something along that line, or being out. So very strange, very odd details. So what do you think at this point?
I mean, it's kind of weird, like what I read, because there's some research preparing for this show as relates to Bobby Fuller, and learned a lot of interesting things about the case. Now, his mom didn't see that car all that day until about 5 p.m. in the evening,
something along that, right?
Yeah, so it don't be parked in this open space, right? And they said he had rigor mortis, so that means he's been dead for some time. So who drove him to that place?
Rigor. Yeah.
So I mean, in order to have rigor mortis, to be that stiff, he had to be dead for some hours. So how did he get to that place? Who drove him there? I mean, anybody see it? The person got the car?
See, that's one of the strange things about this case. This is one of the stranger celebrity cases that I've seen, death cases, because of that aspect. Hold on just a minute. I've got to go plug this.
Hey, y'all, we talking about Bobby Fuller. I fought the law, and the law won. Bobby Fuller, who died a tragic death at the age of 23 years young, July 18th, 1966. Our guest is brother Albert Lanier, freelance journalist, investigative journalist extraordinaire, giving us some insight into this case. Nobody died.
Investigative. Right. How fitting, I would say. You're trying to get this down. How fitting your title is, especially with this case.
Yeah.
So I just outlined some of the strange aspects of this case. Very strange aspects of this case, right? So when we look at Bobby Fuller, when we look at this case, one of the reason why I always found this interesting was, again, in this case, we do not have a suspect. The police did not arrest anyone. To my knowledge, there wasn't a lot of questioning of individuals by the police, meaning LAPD. And as I mentioned before, You had an officer that took the actual gas can that was in the car and that was clearly evidence,
right,
and threw it away. At least that's what Bob Keane, who was the owner of Delphi Records, stated that they didn't seem to care about the case. They didn't seem to care. They didn't seem to investigate. And the modus operandi, it seemed to me, was that this was essentially a suicide. In fact, I believe it was a coroner's report that that both accident and suicide were checked off.
Yeah. You know what's interesting?
So,
yeah, go ahead.
So we have a guy. So this always intrigued me. The reason why this case always intrigued me is, I'm just going to be blunt. I don't believe this man committed suicide. There's no way in hell that this guy committed suicide. I'm going to state that right off the bat here. There's just simply no way. It can't be the case. There's just no way. And others who knew him were convinced that he did not commit suicide. That was the case. Now, some people may argue, well, it could have been a freak occurrence. I mean, I don't know who would, but maybe there are people who are like, hey, we really don't know what happened. It could have been a freak occurrence. And there are some theories that have come up. One was that he had gone to some party and that he had taken LSD, and that somehow he had supposedly got a bad batch of acid and it killed him. And to cover up his death, they put him in this car and somehow had it driven back to the apartment. That's one theory that's come up. Another aspect that's come up is the aspect of organized crime. As you're probably well aware, organized crime was involved in many respects with the music industry in the 60s. You had a certain amount of organized crime element in the music industry. And so there's this belief that Bobby may have pissed off the wrong people or aggravated the wrong people and wound up dead. So there's the so-called organized crime element. There's also, I believe, a young lady that he was supposedly involved with named Melody or Melanie that he was seeing. And, Unsolved Mysteries did a segment of this many years ago, or a number of years ago. And, one of the things that they put forth was that she was really the girlfriend of some organized crime figure, and this figure may have wanted Bobby out of the way. So there are several elements, there's several theories as to what happened to Bobby Fischer. I'm sorry, to Bobby Fuller.
Yeah, what happened to Bobby Fischer too? That's interesting.
Bobby Fischer is a whole other story.
Yeah.
What happened to him is a whole different story. I don't know why.
Right. Now,
I'm mixing up.
Now I saw that Unsolved Mystery. See, it's like you talking about the media, like the TV thing earlier, like how it's misleading, it's entertainment, it's dumbing down. But I know I saw AJ Benz's, one of my favorite shows of all time,
Mysteries and Scandals.
They actually claimed to track down the mysterious Melanie or Melody, whatever her name was.
Right,
it's
true.
She said she was the person. Right. I don't know what to believe with this, but she said that she was sent there to watch over him. I guess she was like an informant for somebody to watch what his moves would be. They probably had an intimate relationship as well, but she was there to feed, hear his thoughts and, help him navigate stuff and figure out what was his next move for somebody else. And then they talked about how one of the silent partners in Bob King's Delphi Records, this guy named Larry Nunez, had like an $850,000 life insurance policy on Bobby Fuller, which in today's money would be almost $7 million. So he had an $850,000 life insurance policy back in '66 which will be almost $7 million in today's money on Bobby Fuller.
Right.
And Bobby
So
wanted
there
out.
was the insurance policy. There was the insurance policy on Bobby that was taken out by Larry New. Bob Keane himself says he didn't know about it.
But here's the thing, but they changed the ruling from suicide to accident.
Suicide to
not collect insurance money unless it was ruled an accident. It could not be ruled a suicide. He get their insurance money.
Because
the
here's
other
the thing, though, when you look at the insurance aspect.
Well, I mean, like Randy, his brother Randy Fuller was in the band. He had $150,000 life insurance policy on him. So I'm trying to say, how did Bob King don't know, but yet the band members know that they took out insurance policies on him? How do Bob King don't know what Randy Fuller knew about the insurance policies?
Interesting, isn't it? His statement. Here's another thing that's interesting. When you look at the insurance policy aspect, actually, that's not that unusual even now. One of the things that some people may know, but others may not, is that corporations often take out insurance policies on employees.
Yeah.
Especially employees that have diseases or maladies or illnesses. And they collect on those insurance policies. People have found this out over the years, that their husband or their wife died and the company they worked for had an insurance policy on them and collected once they died. And so this is kind of, I hate to say standard, but it's not unusual. It's pretty standard fare when it comes to companies, corporations, and outfits. In this case, I'm not that surprised that Bobby had an insurance policy on him. Insurance, of course, is not unusual in show business, in any of the entertainment industries. Oh, yeah. For example, when you do a movie, it has to be insured. Any major motion picture, any major production has to have completion insurance or insurance, like a bond or insurance. And actors often have to be bondable, right? You're able to insure them, literally. Like, for example, I think it was Woody Allen had stated that he couldn't use Robert Downey Jr. in a movie because the insurance company wouldn't allow him to. I guess at that point, he wasn't bondable or insurable, whatever the language is for that. So insurance is not that unusual. It's not unusual in this. In the case of Bobby Fuller, to me, like I look at that and I go, not surprised. I mean, it may surprise other people, but I'm not surprised at all. Do I believe that insurance was the motive for killing Bobby? No, I don't. What happened to Bobby was bizarre. It's one of the strangest deaths I've ever seen of any level of celebrity. I don't know if it's the strangest, but it's one of the strangest. And it's strange to me because of the circumstances. So let me see, because my understanding with Bobby, let's look at, because when you mentioned insurance, I think that's important. It gets into the company, the music, not just Delphi Records, but the music industry in general. Right. Now, my understanding is that Bob Keane of Delphi, and I guess Mustang Records, had a distribution deal with a guy called Morris Levy.
Right.
Morris Levy was involved not only in terms of the record business or the music business, but also in terms of factories and producing in various aspects, vertical integration in the music business. And from my understanding and what I've read and what I've looked up, Morris Levy was involved with organized crime, or he was involved with elements of organized crime. So the scuttlebutt when it comes to Bobby was that Bobby was not happy with what was going on in regards to the way that he was dealt with in the label, the way that he was dealt with in terms of the business. Bobby wanted more control over how money in terms of the promotion of the songs. I think one of the songs that were released, I think it was the Magic Touch, didn't do well, didn't chart effectively, so it didn't do well. And Bobby was getting tired of not knowing certain things about how much money was being spent to promote the Bobby Fuller for to promote the records, other business aspects, and he wanted more, not just control over those aspects, but wanted more knowledge over that. And more scuttlebutt, of course, is that Bobby wanted to basically either go solo or basically just break up the band and head back to El Paso, build his own studio, and basically, again, be in charge of his music, control his music his way. Because it was very clear that Bobby was not happy with a lot of the elements that were going on in the business. And I spoke about this when I talked about Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke was somebody who wanted to control his music through publishing, through masters and master recordings. It was very clear in the case of Bobby Fuller that he wanted more control over how the band was being promoted, in terms of how the songs were being promoted. I wanted accounting in terms of the monies that were being spent. The financial aspect was real important because I think he felt that there were irregularities going on in that department, and he wanted to know what was going on. He wanted to get more accurate information. Again, I think he wanted control over his career, control over his music in terms of probably the production end, right? Like he wanted to build his own studio. My understanding is he wanted to go back to El Paso, build his own studio, right? He had built a makeshift studio or a basic studio or sort of studio at his home or his parents' home years ago. So clearly he was somebody who had a certain knowledge of sound engineering or learned through reading, going to libraries and reading all about that, kind of soaked that up. And so it was very clear because the band was becoming a success and they were very, they had done this, I think it was a Nancy Sinatra movie called The Ghost, the Invisible Bikini, where they were like a band that was lip singing songs of other groups. And they were on shows like, I think it was like Hullabaloo, shows of the era, music shows of the era. So they were big, they were on the way up. Like I said, I Fought the Law and the Law Won, or I Fought the Law was a big hit for them. They were in the top 10 with that hit. And they were, Love's Made a Fool of You was another one, Buddy Holly, that they had done. And I think what Bobby wanted, and again, there seems to be a theme, at least for me, when I look at the music industry and some of the people who die in the music industry, is the control factor and the knowledge factor. They wanted knowledge of the practices that were going on behind their backs, information about what was really going on, and control over their own careers, and to a certain extent, control over their music. Yeah. And so when you look at Bobby Fuller, you see that element. The promotional aspects he was concerned about. I think he was concerned about, what they were doing to spend in terms of spending money. Now, I don't know if payola was involved. Maybe there was some payola involved. But he really wanted more accounting in terms of the expenses, more accounting in terms of the money. And he wanted, from what I understand, to basically kind of either go solo or and just go back to El Paso and do his thing. But he clearly had plans.
Yeah, I think he had plans. The problem is, like, it reminds me sort of Sam Cooke, but it doesn't because he didn't have the catalog. He didn't have that. He wasn't long in the game like Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke paid some major dues and had a catalog to justify his interest in having more control of his career. I think Bobby was very ambitious, like a Sam, but he didn't have that catalog. He didn't have that, because even what I Fought the Law, now I read and what I researched is that payola was paid to promote that album, to promote that record. So his next song came out, didn't do as well as I Fought the Law. So he had this hit, and also he was canceling gigs. Like they had a lucrative
Yep.
gig set up in San Francisco. He canceled it
Mhm.
at the last
Yep.
minute. So he wasn't being very cooperative with the system. And Morris Levy, he was a product of organized crime. He was very well connected to the Genovese and the Gambino crime families, the New Jersey and the East Coast mob. So he was very
that's
well
the scuttlebutt.
beast.
That's the scuttlebutt in regards to Morris Levy, that he was involved with these East Coast
He definitely was a
mob,
gangster.
East Coast crime
Yeah,
families.
he was a gangster.
And so that was, I mean, again, you're looking at a guy. Here's the thing with Bobby Fuller. He was a guy who basically was a musician, that he was a kind of self-taught, and he was a self-made musician. That's what you got to understand about Bobby Fuller. He was a self-made musician. He came from a place which was not a music hub. El Paso, Texas was not a music hub. It wasn't like Austin, right?
Well, you did not, okay, but his hero was Buddy Holly, right? But that's Lubbock, right? Is Lubbock a music mecca? I mean, it produced Buddy Holly, though, who was his hero. That was his god, Buddy Holly. He wanted to be Buddy Holly.
Right. He was very heavily influenced by Buddy Holly. But the point that I want to make about him was, when you look at someone like Bobby Fuller, because you know, either I brought up or you had brought up as well, Sam Cooke. The difference, I think, with Bobby Fuller, there's some similarities. The difference is Bobby Fuller was a self-made musician, was extremely focused on being a musician and on his music. In that sense, he was kind of a little like Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke was focused on the business aspects and being independent and having control over his music. Someone like Bobby Fuller was used to having a degree of independence because he came from El Paso. He had set up his own club for teenagers. And it was doing well. So he was kind of used to being a business guy, and he was used to running this band, and he was the kind of the force behind the band. And he was a guy who could play different instruments. You know, he was a drummer at one point. He was playing guitar. So he was this kind of very focused, very intense musician who was focused on his music and focused on, I believe, the studio aspects, because he created his own studio. And I think he was interested in certain aspects of the music business and on making sure they probably worked in his favor. And I believe he felt that they didn't work in his favor, that they weren't. So when you mentioned the payola, for him, that was just one of a number of areas where he was going, he wasn't aware what's going on. So he's a guy that's used to having his own club, used to building his own studio, used to running his own band. And then when he goes to Hollywood, and he goes to LA, and he comes to Hollywood, he's signed to a label, and the label starts to exert control. And the label starts to exert pressure. And the label starts determining and trying to dictate. Okay, we need you guys to go and do, and that's the music business. The music business telling him, hey, you need to go and do these shows.
Right.
And so those were kind of lucrative gigs, right? Because they were spending money on Bobby promoting his music and promoting the records. And if they're spending money to promote the records, they need to get that money back.
Right.
So when he said, I'm not going to go tour in San Francisco, he wanted to do a European tour. They didn't allow him to do that, or he didn't get to do that. He didn't like that. But when he wasn't being cooperative, I won't tour. I want to know what's going on with the money spent to promote the music. I want to know what's going on in regards to my songs and what's happening in regards to in those aspects. It's not, you mentioned Sam Cooke in regards to catalog. That's true. He didn't have much of a catalog. I mean, he'd been recording mostly locally and regionally before he went to Hollywood. So he didn't have a huge backlog. He didn't have a huge catalog. He had maybe a couple of hits, a couple of things that had charted. Again, you have to understand, he was starting out in the mainstream music business, in the mainstream music industry in LA. So he was basically, if not an up and comer, then he was a new star. But he wasn't quite up there entirely, but he was a relatively new star. He had a big hit, He had another song that didn't hit as well. And he was busy. The band was busy performing. They're performing at clubs on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, places like Whiskey A Go Go and Ciro's and other places. Some of the, I don't know if Ciro's is there anymore, but I think I've seen Whiskey A Go Go years ago. Mm-hmm. So he's busy performing in L.A. They're doing this movie. They did this Nancy Sinatra for Exposure, movie for. They're doing TV shows like Hullabaloo. They're busy. That's part of the grind of the music machine. And again, here's a guy who wanted control over his career, control over his music, and control over the business aspects. And he winds up dead.
I think that
the difference is this death is strange. Now, the Sam Cooke that I talked about last week, Sam Cooke's death was odd. There's no doubt about that. But it was explained. There was at least some elements that you could explain with Sam Cooke. With Bobby Fuller's, we just have questions, and they're not explained. The only thing that's sort of stated is could have been an accident, could have been suicide. We don't know. Well, here's what I'm convinced. I'm convinced that this was a murder. And I'm convinced this was not a suicide.
Okay.
Could have been an accidental homicide. It's possible. But I believe this was a deliberate murder. And what leads me to this is the fact that when you look at all these elements, they're all odd to me. First and foremost, you have the fact that the car was gone for quite some amount of time. That's a whole other story. This changeling.
LAPD. Yeah.
That story, if you know, and I would advise people to go look up the real story behind it.
Yeah, crazy.
You won't believe that story and how shameless it was. It's stunning how shameless that was. But in the case of Bobby Fuller, I believe he was murdered. And it's very clear to me that he was murdered. There's no way this could be a suicide. No way. People who commit suicide don't douse their body in gasoline and try to commit suicide that way. It's just not done. First of all, you're going to get rid of yourself by probably the most painful method available. No. So I rule that out completely. I don't believe this was a suicide at all. Yeah, I believe it was murder. And this is why. Go ahead, sorry.
Now I'm going to add too that there was no traces of alcohol or drugs found in his system.
That gets to the details of this case. First of all, there were no drugs found in his system. There was no alcohol. Bobby was, he liked a beer occasionally, and I think he smoked an occasional joint, but he wasn't a heavy drug user, or he wasn't a heavy alcohol user. Didn't drink a lot. So there are no drugs, no barbiturates, no drugs found in his system. So clearly, if the elements of this coroner's report are true, that means that he wasn't drugged, that he wasn't under the influence, unless it's a drug that doesn't show up in a tox screen or normally in an autopsy.
Right.
That'd be the only thing. So from what I see, I believe that someone lured him away from that apartment that night, and that he was killed primarily because of his, how do I put this, difficult nature in regards to the music business. And the reason I believe this was because you mentioned lack of a catalog, right? Bobby only had a couple hits. It's not like he was recording. I don't think he had tons and tons and tons of recorded material. So it's not like they were killing him for his music. It's not a situation where, oh, when he dies, the music is going to be worth more money. He was a guy who was an up and comer. He was a new star on the horizon. He wasn't an established guy yet.
Right.
So there would be no reason to kill him over his catalog, over his songs. And, you know, again, the song that was a big hit was a cover. It wasn't a song he wrote.
Right.
Another one he did was Love Made Fool of You, again, a Buddy Holly hit.
I mean, he worshiped Buddy Holly.
Right. Yeah. I like Buddy Holly. So,
I mean, but you know what? Interesting.
I wouldn't go that far, but you know, but I like Buddy Holly.
But I know Buddy Holly. He's actually great. Buddy Holly was very innovative for his time, and he was really ahead of the curve. He was out here at 22. But another connection to the Buddy Holly thing was that Bob King, he signed Richie Valens at one point. Richie Valens, who died with Buddy Holly in that plane crash back in '59, was signed to Bob King. So Bob King is weird to me that he don't know. I don't know what's going on. Like, but that's your label. King has always been.
I'm going to be brutally honest. I don't trust Bob King.
Right.
At all.
He's dead now, right? He's gone. He's gone, right? He's
I believe. I guess I can say whatever I want.
But I'm saying, why he don't know what's going on in his own label? I mean, that's supposed to be his label, supposedly. Who really runs?
Yeah, he says he doesn't know. Well, you know the attitude. I don't know if you're aware of the attitude, but the attitude is don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
Hear no evil, see no evil. Sign no evil. Right? Hey, I don't know, doesn't involve me, wasn't aware of it, wasn't me. Kind of like that Shaggy song.
It wasn't me. Yeah. But you know what's interesting too? Right across the street where they found Bobby Fuller's body in his mom's car, Janis Joplin was found dead in the hotel, the Landmark Motor Hotel, October 4th, 1970, which is right across the street from where they found Bobby Fuller at the age of 27. And I remember like people in the industry tell me about that time that Clyde Davis took her into a room by herself to make her sign something, made her offer she couldn't refuse, supposedly. And that she knew the truth about what happened to Jimi Hendrix and Morrison, and then next thing you know, she dead at 27, just like they are. You know, so it's fascinating. Nobody dies a natural death in show business.
Well, yeah, that's that statement. That is the sort of title of this episode. But here's the thing about Bobby Fuller. First of all, I don't trust Bob King. I always thought that guy knew more about what happened to Bobby than he let on.
Yeah.
So I believe he knew. If he didn't know who killed Bobby, then he was aware of what happened with Bobby. Because he said he went over there and the cop threw the trash can, the gas can away. And he had to think
about, right? Ain't that crazy to think about that the cops would do that?
It's blatant.
Throw away evidence.
Right. See, that's suspicious. Not only that, but ostensibly the cops did not dust the car for fingerprints. Did not, I guess, I don't think they dust either on the exterior or interior of the car, reportedly. I don't believe they conducted a bunch of interviews. They didn't make an effort toward an actual verifiable investigation from what I understand.
Yeah, but
say what you want about Sam Cooke.
Yeah.
They had a coroner's inquest for Sam Cooke. They came to a verdict for Sam Cooke. There was no inquest for Bobby Fuller. There was no arrest for Bobby Fuller. There was no trial for Bobby Fuller's death. None. I mean, when you look at this case, if it's true that they took the gas can and threw it away, it's outrageous. It's ridiculous. That's as blatant as it gets. Now, again, I try to remember whether it was a uniform that did that or a plainclothes detective.
It depends.
In either case, it makes absolutely no sense.
It depends on the TV show. Because one show had a plainclothes, the other had one in uniform. So, like you said,
there
TV.
You go.
What you said.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's what I noticed too. I was doing additional research. Wait a minute. There's a uniform throwing it away here, and there's a plainclothes detective throwing it away on Unsolved Mysteries. I'm like,
And you know what Unsolved Mystery said, man? They said that it was them that got them to change his cause of death from suicide to accident. That would change months after he passed away.
That's
but
what I'm
Unsolved
saying.
Mystery
That was
claimed,
changed some time ago.
yeah, but
that's interesting because I saw that segment again. I saw that segment again for research. I saw it again for research.
Yeah.
And they said, in the update that it went from accident, the suicide to accident. I'm like, wait a minute. They changed that sometime after the death.
Because that show came out in 96.
Came out.
That show came out in 96. The Unsolved Mystery episode came out in 1996. It didn't happen 30 years later. Like you said, that happened months later after it happened. They changed it because they got their insurance money. I already know he was murdered. I believe that Bob King and Morris Levy and Larry, they know more. Like you said, they was part of that. They were part of that.
It's very clear to me.
It's like some LA Confidential.
It's very clear to me.
Yeah.
It's very clear to me that Bob Keane knew what happened to Bobby.
Mm-hmm.
It's very clear he knew what happened because he headed over there supposedly.
Yeah, he was over the scene. He saw the police throw away the garbage can, according to the
TV. I always thought that was suspicious. Well, he happens to come out of there and he sees the police throw away the gas can.
The garbage can.
Come on now.
And why nobody didn't grab it out the garbage can? I guess people was in shock, though.
I don't buy Bob King. Well, I mean, I again, it's kind of convenient, isn't it? He happens to say, "Oh, I saw the police throw this away." They didn't do anything. Yeah, but Bobby had his issues with you, Bob. I know Bob's dead, but he had his issues with you, Bob, and he had, again, Bob Keane had signed a deal with Morris Levy's outfit to distribute records. I think in that year, 1966. And I look at Keane, and that guy knows more about what happened with Bobby Fuller. He does, or he did, I should say. So I look at this case, and I go over this case, and it's a strange, it's a weird one because I look at the details. First and foremost, I believe that Bobby got a call from someone, I think, it may have been business, it may have been pleasure, it may have been a bit of both, but it induced him to go out that night. I believe that Bobby was probably physically manhandled.
Mm-hmm.
And beat up. And that he was killed that way. There was no, to my knowledge, there was no, I think the cause of death was, I think on the report would be, it was eventually like asphyxia, inhalation of gasoline.
Yeah.
And again, when his mom had opened the car, his mom discovered him, there was the fumes from gasoline, and those are heavy fumes. As anyone who's filled the gas tank of their car or been near gasoline will know, those are heavy fumes. Heavy fumes. So here's what I really think happened. He left at 2-something. He met someone who was supposed to meet them, beat the crap out of Bobby. There probably was a struggle of sorts, but they beat the crap out of him and killed him. And what they did was they doused him in gasoline. Now, there was a book of matches that was supposedly found in the backseat of the car, found in the car.
Yeah.
So that leads one to believe that they were going to burn up Bobby, right? But here's my point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever he met them, if they were going to do that and they killed him, why not just go to a remote location, douse the body with gasoline, light a match, toss the match there, and leave it there. I think that that probably wasn't entirely the intention with Bobby.
Okay.
They wanted his body found. I tend to believe that the gas was on him partly to give that impression that they might have wanted to burn him up. But you have to look at it from a logical, I mean, it's illogical in many respects, but you have to look at it from a logical standpoint. Why would they need to bring the car back to the apartment? Why? Once they got him away from the apartment and they were able to overpower him and kill him, they could do whatever they wanted. Why did they need his body to be found? They brought the car back with him in it because they wanted his body to be found there. Mm. Just like I said with Sam Cooke. Why was he found in the office at the Hotel Hacienda? Why was Sam Cooke found in the office of the Hotel Hacienda? Why? Because whoever killed him and whoever is involved in his death wanted him to be found naked with a sport jacket on and a shoe. They wanted that door broken. They wanted him to be found in that area because it would be a sort of humiliating, but exposure. He would be exposed literally and figuratively in terms of his life. It was to humiliate him. In the case of Bobby Fuller, it's a lot more bizarre. Think about this. Again, if we assume that this guy was, and I think it's a very strong assumption to make, and I think it's the reality, that this guy was overpowered, beaten to death, killed in some way, probably physically. Some people believe when they looked at his body like he'd been dragged on asphalt or dragged on some surface. Why wouldn't you just take this guy, put him in the trunk of a car, drive to some remote location, douse him in gasoline, burn up the body? Why? No. They wanted his body found. They wanted him found. And as bizarre as it seems, they wanted it found in a way that would be considered odd. Right? They just didn't care. In the case of Bobby Fuller, I don't think they cared. Again, you have to understand, they chose to bring the car back to the apartment. That's a risky move if you're the one who killed Bobby Fuller. It's risky. You could have witnesses seeing you come out of that car and leaving the apartment. Why would you drive it back? Whoever killed him and whoever was involved in it, they wanted his body found, and the simplest way was to drive the car back. That says to me that they must have known that this car likely didn't belong to Bobby, that it belonged to his mother. I get the feeling that whoever did this knew enough about Bobby. It wasn't just some stranger, or when I mean stranger, it wasn't someone who knew nothing about him. It was someone who knew enough about this man that he knew he lived at Sycamore, I think it was Sycamore Lane or Sycamore Drive in Hollywood, the location of the apartment. He knew that the car that he was driving was likely his mother's, not his, and knew where he parked. Because I believe it was in the parking spot, if I'm not mistaken. Someone knew. They knew enough about Bobby to know this. And they thought the easiest way to, for this guy to be found was at his own place. Very risky move when you think about it. Again, they could have done anything they wanted with his body. If once they killed him, they could have done anything. But they chose to drive him back, which says to me they wanted him found. Again, you look at that. It's a way, I believe that a killing like Sam Cooke, and in this case, Bobby Fuller, those are message killings. They're meant to convey a message. In Cooke's case, it was so bizarre. And in Fuller's case, it was so bizarre. It was so odd that they just didn't care. They just said, you know what? We're going to drive this car back to the apartment and we're going to leave it there and he'll be found. That's a certain amount of arrogance. You got to have some, stones on you to do something like that. Very risky.
I just think when you saying all that, I think that Bobby Fuller's mom should have did what Valletta Wallace did and sue the LAPD because they just did a horrible job. Because I can't understand. They brought that car back. She saw that car at 5 o'clock in the you know what I'm saying? It's light outside. You got people walking around. People saw something. And the cops did not interview these people. They were witnesses that saw things. Because you can't tell me she was looking all day for that car. And then it appears.
That's right.
Somebody
she
saw
looked out the window, wasn't there. Wasn't there in the morning, wasn't there earlier in the afternoon.
Yeah.
That's one of the things about this. It's like, that's why I say whoever did this did not care. They did not care. And then you had, I think it was a couple of the bandmates or a couple of individuals who said before his mother found the car that he didn't see the car. They didn't see it, but then she wound up seeing it. So again, when I look at this, I go, they wanted this body to be found. Now you're probably wondering, why was gasoline there? Could they be trying to burn the body up? Yeah, that might have been the case. But my view is this: if they wanted to burn the body up, again, why didn't they go to a location that was remote? Why didn't they just go ahead and do it? Why did they drive the car back? I tend to believe that the gasoline was more, this is my extrapolation. This is my assessment. I believe the gasoline was meant to sort of serve as a cover-up, as a patina. Because there was blood supposedly underneath his head. And he was supposedly in advance. Go ahead.
His brother saw his eyebrows kind of ripped off a little bit.
Right. That's another aspect.
You
had blood underneath this. You had blood supposedly underneath his head. You had an eyebrow that was supposedly ripped. You had the body in a state of rigor, supposedly, rigor mortis. What this adds up to is Bobby Fuller could not have driven this car himself.
Hell no.
More than likely, he put in the front, kept upward. Whoever killed him or was involved drove this car back to the apartment and then took Fuller and put him on the seat and got out of there.
Wow.
He hightailed it out. And they wanted his body found. And so I tend to believe that the gasoline was more a matter of masking something, covering up something. What that is, I'm not quite sure. But it seems to me that gasoline has a very potent, it's an overwhelming smell to it. It's an overwhelming odor to it, right? So it's almost like they wanted some people to keep away from him or something like that, or something along that line. Again, they could easily have burnt that body up and nobody would have known anything about Bobby. They chose not to do that. Some people said, well, they were going to burn the body. There was somewhere where they couldn't burn the body. And my point is this: if they had killed him, why would they, and they had the car, why in the hell wouldn't they just drive somewhere remote and do it? No, they chose to do that. So they bring that body back to the apartment. It's already in some degree or some state of rigor. It's got blood there. Supposedly, according to his brother, he had an eyebrow that was plucked off. You had supposedly bruising on his body. And again, and I'm just going to come out and say this. And you see that I'm going to come out and say this. I believe that whoever killed him, I probably shouldn't say this, but I believe that he was murdered, of course, but I believe that he was murdered by ex-law enforcement. I think whoever killed him was probably had been in law enforcement. Now, why do I say this? I say this because there was no gunshot. They didn't want ballistics. I say this because the way he was killed was more physical than anything else, bruising. I also say this because whoever did this was, you look at the aftermath, no fingerprints were dusted. There was, they supposedly got rid of the can. I think whoever dealt this was someone who was in law enforcement, an ex-law enforcement, somebody who had been in law enforcement. I don't think it was active. I think it was somebody who probably was working for some entity that wanted Fuller dead.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't believe this was law enforcement. I don't believe this was mob. I don't believe it was organized crime, per se. No self-respecting made man, no mob hitman would ever kill anyone this way. They either use a gun, or they would, or garrote wire, or something else. They don't do this with bodies. They would never leave a body like this in a car in this condition, cover them with gasoline. They would either shoot someone and get rid of the body, or leave it in a car somewhere. So I don't believe it was organized crime.
So could it be possible that these ex-law enforcement person or people were connected to Bob King and company, or?
I think so. I think when you look at Morris Levy, I think when you look at elements in the music industry, I believe it was elements in the music industry that had him killed, that had Bobby Fuller killed. It's very clear to me. I don't think it was the insurance money per se. I don't think that was the motive. I mean, $800,000 is good money, but to get rid of somebody who's, an up and comer and producing, what you want in the music industry is you want people that are going to produce hits. That means the more hits they produce, the more chance, eventual chance you get to get that catalog and to get that publishing means the more money that you can get. Less hits, less of a smaller catalog means less of a chance of making money.
Yeah, but with him, he was losing. He was like a money pit to them. I could see why them, because like I said, if you adjust it for today's value, that's like almost $7 million. So I'm looking at they losing money on this guy. They got to do all his payola. He's canceling gigs. He's not being cooperative. Why not cash him out? I mean, save you the headache.
Right. It's more of a sense that this guy isn't going to produce. He isn't going to make us the money we want. And he's becoming more difficult. He's asking questions he shouldn't ask. Yeah. He's getting involved in things he shouldn't. And, we don't need this. We don't need this.
I mean, it happens all the time. It's so many people it's so many talented folks that never make it, quote unquote. But I mean, he had a shot and they, did what they had to do and say, look, let's cut our losses, man. It's a business, not personal, right?
Right. I think it's more of a way of looking at him and going from a business standpoint. He said, he's not going to put us in the black. He's going to put us in the red. And he really wants to know too much of what's going on. We can't allow him to know too much of what's going on. Again, a control issue, but primarily it's a control issue. It's a matter of keeping the music artist under lock and key in a sense. About keeping people under control. You can't allow these people to know about what's going on in terms of the accounting, in terms of the expenses, in terms of the marketing. you can't allow them to know what is happening. You can't allow them to have any sense of control over that, because it will be detrimental for the long-term interest. Again, you don't want artists like that having control over music or any aspect of the music. In this case, it wasn't so much publishing or mechanical rights or neighboring rights per se. In his case, it was a sense of being able to control an artist. I think in Bobby Fuller. Bobby Fuller was an independent personality. He was a guy used to calling his own shots. He was a guy used to doing his own thing. And he was a guy that was, I think, chafing under, being in the mainstream music industry, where the labels exerted pressure and the owners of the labels and the people that were in the business were exerting control. Yeah. And he didn't want that. He didn't want other people controlling him. He wanted to control himself. He wanted to be able to have the technical control over the studios that he produced in, and over how much money was being spent to promote his music, and over touring, being able to tour the way he wanted, and being able to perform the way he wanted, being able to promote the way he wanted. It was all those other aspects. And so when you start asserting yourself and you start trying to maintain control and try to be in control, that's when things get dicey and they get difficult. So I believe, like I said, I believe that Bobby Fuller was killed by somebody who was ex-law enforcement.
Okay.
I'm just stating this on the record now.
Mm-hmm.
He was ex-law enforcement. Because to me, it explains a lot. It explains why he was killed the way that he was killed. They didn't want anything tying anything tied to them, anything tied to this person. To me, the gasoline is a way of kind of masking. It's odd, but it's a way of kind of masking whatever happened. You could explain it because, again, when people said there were bruises on him, the coroner says it's petechial hemorrhage created by the dousing of the gasoline and the impact of other elements and variables. See, that's written off that way. And so I believe the gasoline was on him to sort of cover things up. And I believe he's brought back to the apartment because they wanted him to be found. He could have been disposed of any way they wanted to, but they chose not to do it. They chose to make him a public spectacle in that sense. Not in the sense that he was open to the public, but that he was found in his car.
Not only his car, but his mom's car, who was visiting him. Because by the end of the week, by Friday, July 22nd, he was buried. They found his body July 18th, and by Friday, July 22nd, they got him buried. But it'll be interesting because the only remaining person from his family is Randy, his brother. Now he had an older brother from his mom, had a previous relationship, and he died tragic death, killed by his friend, so-called good friend, shot him to death and stuff like that. So no, his mom went through a lot of stuff, but
right.
I mean, and I think Randy wrote a book with somebody that came out recently, but
I Fought the Law, I think was the name of the book.
Yeah, I Fought the Law, yeah. But it's unfortunate, man. But he was murdered. I believe he was murdered as well. There was no suicide.
Right, right. So the whole area, the whole aspect of it wants to be is seen as suspicious. It's suspicious. Mm-hmm. It's suspicious, right? But again, it's interesting, isn't it? No real investigation, no fingerprints, no effective interviews in this case, no suspect. It's like they didn't care. Because likely they did not. Yeah, they did not care at all. They did not care at all. And so when you look at this case, again, where it ties into what I had previously talked about with Sam Cooke, is you look at the music industry, and I believe it's a matter of assertion of control over artists in this particular case. It's a matter of we need to get people under lock and key, in a sense, metaphorically. We need to get people, we need to be able to control them. We need to be able to get them in line. And that's an element in any industry in regards to employees, to workers, or people within that industry, or even professionals within the industry. And I think it was the case here. They didn't want someone who was going to be a independent personality, an independent artist. He can't be independent in the sense in that industry. And Bobby just was asking too many questions, I believe. I think he was very suspicious about things that were going on. And again, if the scuttlebutt is true, that he intended to go solo, that he intended to break up the band, that he intended to even go back to El Paso, build his own studio, and, you know, make music his way, that's something they didn't want. That's something that people didn't want to happen. So it's a very strange, murky, odd case. Very odd. And you know, it's you look at the circumstances of this case, and it's been one that has been bizarre. But you know, I don't, like I said, I don't believe he was. I believe he was murdered.
Okay.
I believe the killer was ex-law enforcement. He's a former cop. I'm convinced.
Well, we could say
Somebody who knew how to cover up enough. And I don't believe it was organized crime. I don't believe this was random. I think it was someone who knew what they were doing and did it in such a way as to be really off kilter.
Okay, well, I would say this: a corrupt, organized crime are corrupt police. Corrupt police is organized crime. So, and you look at the cases of Tupac, Biggie, and Bobby Fuller. There's this thing about this LAPD that really is interesting, because, like, when Biggie mom sued the LAPD, they were about to lose a lot of money, you know, based on the Ramparts thing and all that stuff. So, I would tell people, just look at the movie LA Confidential to understand how corrupt LA really is as far as their law enforcement. We got, at the end of this month is the anniversary of the Nipsey Hussle assassination, and he was supposed to meet with the top brass of the LAPD that's before he got killed on that Sunday in LA, March 31st, 2019. He supposed to meet with the LAPD's finest, their top brass, on that Monday. So, you know, it is what it is. But how can the people get in touch with you? What are your websites and contact information, Brother Albert?
Well, you can contact me on Twitter,
okay,
at Critic Incorporated. Contact me on Facebook under my name, Albert Lanier. I'm on Facebook there. I guess if you want to email me, I guess you can email me at mediawriter1@yahoo.com. Okay. And of course, there's my blog. If you care to read my blog, I had mentioned Danny Casolaro and the Inslaw and Octopus. So if you want to read my article about that, which is entitled, I believe it's called Labyrinth, you can go to www.medium.com/@thedoctor50. That's medium.com/@thedoctor50 to read my blog article on the Inslaw and Octopus affairs.
Like, it's AT and TH, or how you at the doctor?
Oh, at THEDOCTOR50.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure I type, because people ask how they can get in touch with you.
Right. Okay. So if you want to, again, in order to get in touch with me, you can contact me on Twitter at Critic Incorporated. You can contact me at Facebook under my name, Albert Lanier, and you can contact me on email to email me at let me see, I just said it, at mediawriter1@yahoo.com.
Media Writer.
Media Writer, the number 1@yahoo.com. And finally, my blog, which can be found if you want to read about the Inslaw and Octopus and Danny Casolaro to a minor extent. The name of the blog piece is called Labyrinth, and you can find it at medium.com/@thedoctor50.
Okay, so we'll just make sure I have this pinned up in the chat, or we'll get off of here. So, you got any closing thoughts, or you like to share with the people? Really appreciate you, brother Albert, spend the time, information, and share with our people. So, you got anything you want to say in closing?
In closing, it's been kind of an interesting. It's kind of interesting to talk about these things in light of, like I said, the media situation seems to be very gossipy.
Yeah.
And it's Megan and Harry and what's his name? I don't even want to say his name, Piers. I just said it. I don't like him. But I'm glad to be. The nice thing about coming is I don't have to. We talked about sort of grittier, harsher, but obviously more fascinating details today. So it was a conversation that went a little differently than I expected, because we got to the sort of true crime elements later on. So it was kind of an interesting conversation. I
I
It was
enjoyed
nice to get away from what everyone else is talking about.
it. Sometimes I was good
That
to
was
go
nice.
get. Yeah, I mean, like I try to be loose with it, but I try to do my homework. Like I said, I didn't know that much about Bobby Fuller based on the things I have seen and came across in the past. But when you start looking at it, it's like, wow, it's the same old playbook, different players, but same old playbook. It's unfortunate. And so thank you, brother Albert, for being on here. We appreciate you so much for spending this time with us. I know it's a lot of time, but I think it was time well spent. Yeah. And I think people really enjoyed it.
It was longer than I expected, but
Yeah,
interesting nonetheless.
That's how it be, man. But thank you so much, brother Albert. You take care of yourself. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening to us. It's been very much enjoyable time. I think time well spent. There's a lot of things going on, but I think it's important that people start to hide the contradictions and start researching for themselves and really spend time with yourself to heighten the contradictions. Like, get to know yourself, start trusting your intuition, looking at stuff like the stuff we said here. You can find out more information online, go read a book, go talk to people, and then come to your own conclusions. Because I think that we need to be encouraging people to think for themselves and to really take back the narrative and create their own. So thank you all for being very patient today, or tonight rather. I know that sometimes we all don't agree on everything, but we all can agree to disagree and still be agreeable. So with that said, thank you. It was a great show, brother Aaron. I appreciate you. Somebody says, is he married? I don't know. I'm gonna ask him that next time. Who's married? To my brother Albert? I don't know. Now I don't think he's married. According to his Facebook profile, I don't think he's married. But let me just wrap this up. Thank y'all, family, for tuning in and not tuning me out. But it's been an interesting ride. Like he said, he didn't know what to expect, but this is we all be. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. But disclaimer: the views expressed by hosts and guests on the We All Be TV platform are not the official views, opinions, beliefs, or perspectives of We All Be News or the We All Be Group, Inc. We All Be News is an organization that thoroughly believes in supplementing the information narrative that is usually supplied by the corporate news entities with those viewpoints and expressions which may be marginalized or ignored for a plethora of reasons. We are about informing the general public on alternative perspectives as it relates to news and information, and letting the general public be the ultimate judge in deciding on how to use said information. Informed citizens are responsible citizens. Thank you for your support, and thank you all, family. Continue to support. Appreciate your words of affirmation, confirmation, and I'm glad that we can help you all on your information highway journey. You want to support the We All Be info movement, Cash App, $R2C2H2. You can Google Pay, PayPal, or Zelle support R2C2H2 at gmail.com. Zemo at R2C2H2. You can also buy artivist art, R2C2H2.com. You can wear artivist art. You got our Teespring shelf below the description box here on YouTube. So thank you all once again for tuning in and not tuning out. And the words of the great Duke Ellington, we love you madly. Keep on producing and pushing. I don't know what's going to happen next time. Somebody said no more next times. I don't know, man. Life is funny that way. I didn't know I was going to be on this show about 3 hours, but that's how life is. Life to me is like performance art. You never know what you're going to get. Or life like about chocolate. Never know what you're going to get. You know, all that stuff. But anyway, y'all take care. Be prepared and know that the best is yet to come. One love.